Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. In a moment of anger, her free hand went into the water and touched Luffy's dick. She touched it and was surprised. "What are you doing?" Luffy murmured, stunned, feeling his weapon being touched like that. Hancock switched her stunned look for a cunning and victorious one. "If you don't want this Empress and she doesn't please you, why is your weapon so erect? Are you going to say you didn't want this beautiful body?" Hancock made an innocent and seductive voice. "Shut up and let go of my cock." Luffy growled, trying to remove Hancock's hand but ended up squeezing her breast. "Luffy. Hancock. Get your hands off me." Hancock shouted and slapped Luffy's face. The next scene was Luffy with a red face while Hancock continued to bathe and scrub her body, both with their faces flushed. Luffy couldn't even imagine that his days were just beginning in this mess. Chapter 197, Boa Hancock 06. Luffy woke up the next day and looked at the woman staring at him. "Good morning?" Luffy raised an eyebrow. She didn't respond. Still mute. "Well, at least don't be a boring woman." Luffy smiled. She had another vein on her forehead but kept silent. They didn't speak for the rest of the night and ended up sleeping turned away from each other. "Well, anyway, we have to look for something to eat." Luffy got up, and Hancock stood still. "Come on, you might not like me, but at least let's do the basics, right?" Hancock didn't respond, but her stomach growled at that moment. "See, your stomach is more honest than you." "Ha ha ha." Luffy laughed while Hancock became a bit embarrassed and ended up standing up as well. Seeing this, Luffy led the duo until they found a weird tree. "We have this here." "This is great," he murmured and began to break the shell of a tree. "What are you doing?" Hancock asked curiously, her tone of voice no longer as arrogant as usual. "This? My grandpa used to throw me in the jungle when I was a kid. I had to learn to survive. My sister was with me too, but she was so slow it didn't count. So I ended up adapting." Luffy smiled as he took a yellow fruit from inside the broken shell. "Your grandpa threw you in the jungle as a child?" she asked curiously. Luffy looked at her strangely. "Where was that ungrateful witch from yesterday?" "Yes. He's Garp, you might understand that?" he said, a bit lost. "Yes, the marine hero." She commented and looked at the fruit, unsure what to do with it. "Don't bite, the shell is hard, you have to remove the stem and the shell falls apart," Luffy said as he removed the stem, holding it with the handcuff hand with Hancock and pulled it off with his free hand. "There, now you have to be careful because it will squirt if you pull too fast." Luffy didn't have time to react as Hancock's fruit exploded, soaking both Luffy and her with the juice. "Luffy. Hancock." They looked at each other for a while without saying anything to each other, until Luffy snorted with a bit of humor. "Ha ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha." Both began to laugh, finding the situation quite relaxed. "I guess we have to go back to the lake," Hancock ended up saying, laughing without thinking, and looked at Luffy, who stopped laughing at that moment. Both stared at each other. "Well, let's get more fruits. Then we'll see about that," Luffy commented, finding the situation strange again, because he expected this woman to be the same woman who got him into a lot of trouble, but she seemed different today. "Yes, you're right," she said with a normal tone, but without the arrogance she usually showed. Luffy picked another fruit and opened the stem before carefully opening it and joining Hancock in eating. He picked some more fruits and took them to the side of the lake where they had bathed, sitting while they ate quietly. "What are we going to do today?" she asked, breaking the silence. "The ideal would be to find the camp, but I doubt we can do that easily. We have to wait for your sisters," he commented. "You didn't come to train? Then let's do that," she said calmly, leaving Luffy even more confused with her behavior today. "What? You want that? You seemed to hate it yesterday." He looked at her with a small smile. "Didn't you see how I fought yesterday? But maybe this Empress has changed her mind today," she commented with a blush, looking a bit embarrassed admitting something like that. "Alright, then. I want to see you keep up then. Let's do that as soon as we finish eating," Luffy commented without losing his smile while Hancock just snorted. They ate in silence until they seemed satisfied. "All set?" he said, and she nodded. Luffy stood up, and Hancock accompanied him. They had clothes a bit torn, but they seemed relaxed while walking through the forest. "Looks like we found some little friends," Luffy commented, looking at a spot full of gorillas. He looked at Hancock by his side and thought of something. "How about seeing who can beat more of them?" he suggested, and Hancock looked at him with a glint of challenge in her eyes. "Do you think you can beat this Empress?" she commented with a small smile, accepting the challenge. Luffy didn't respond, and he simply took the initiative and ran, with Hancock not wanting to be left behind. The gorillas witnessed a strange scene of two humans running hand in hand as they approached, looking at them as prey. In the next moment, the area turned into chaos with the gorillas enraged after being attacked by strangers. It was only after 2 hours of intense fighting that Luffy and Hancock stood in a field of knocked-out giant animals. 20. Luffy announced. "TSK. 20. Hancock murmured, a bit dissatisfied. "Looks like it's a tie. How about we move on to the next group of animals?" Luffy commented, and Hancock nodded. For the rest of the day, neither Hancock nor Luffy seemed interested in returning to the camp. They continued to explore the island, encountering a group of giant snakes. 10. 10 inches. "Shall we move on to the next group then?" Encountering a group of giant wolves. 30. Giant zebras. 20. 20. Giant leopards. 10. 10. Giant lions. 10. 10. They stopped fighting only at night. Luffy picked some more hidden fruits and a wolf, grabbing a piece of wood and imbuing it with Ecchi. He began to cut the wolf to prepare dinner. He had the sword, but it was in a small version in his pocket, so he couldn't increase its size with the handcuff on. "This is good," Hancock had to admit while eating the meat after Luffy heated it on a fire he created. "Glad you liked it. Unfortunately, I can't put any seasoning on the food," Luffy commented, pointing to the handcuffs. "Yes, we'll have to stay like this a bit longer," Hancock commented, not seeming dissatisfied. She ate in silence next to Luffy, and as soon as she finished, she looked up at the starry sky in the middle of the forest. "You know, my sisters also have the slave seal like me," Hancock spoke, and Luffy looked at her a bit surprised. Since he already knew this information, he didn't expect Hancock to take the initiative to tell him here. She stopped looking at the sky and looked at him. "Can you really get rid of it for me and my sisters?" She looked with a glimmer of hope. Luffy was silent for a while. "Yes, as I said, I'll do exactly what I said," Luffy said confidently. "Did you really kill 2 celestial dragons?" she asked another question. "Yes. But how? Doesn't the government know about this? How can they let you roam free?" she asked, bewildered. "It's hard to say, they must surely know, and I thought I would have the Cypher Pol Zero agent and other forces on my tail, but they are strangely quiet," Luffy commented, looking ahead, still unsure why the government hadn't sent major forces after him yet. "Do you think you can survive?" "Yes, I would do something like that. It won't be the government that will stop my goal, which is to become the Emperor of the Sea." Luffy spoke with a sparkle in his eyes, something that caught Hancock's attention. Hancock looked at him for a while. "Emperor of the Sea," she murmured, before starting to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha. You really are a fool, Monkey D. Luffy." Luffy looked a bit displeased by her laughter but was also surprised that she called him by his full name. "But you know, I like that." She smiled at him at that moment, and both looked at each other for several seconds. There was something emerging there, and neither of them knew what to do at that moment. Luffy was a ladies' man, but it wasn't right to lay hands on a woman who was handcuffed and almost naked in front of him, especially since she had been looking down on him until the day before. He was torn between his desire to kiss this woman and his pride in not being with someone who had insulted him so much. "I think it's better if we sleep. We have to break our tie in our little game." Hancock broke the tension, most likely because Luffy did not take the initiative and also because she was lost, having never had to deal with this kind of situation before. "You're right, let's sleep," Luffy agreed, and they both lay down on a bed made of leaves on the ground, against each other while their hands remained joined. As Luffy lay down to sleep, he was unaware of the internal conflict his bed partner was having at that moment. Behind Luffy, Hancock had a blush on her face. She was in conflict. "Why am I acting like this? I should hate this man," she screamed internally. "But I've been like this since he touched me. I should be disgusted by that man, but my heart is racing and I can't stop thinking about him. Moreover, why can't I stay mad at him anymore? Did he do something to me? Yet, I feel happy here. I should hate this place, being trapped with this pirate, but I seem so well. And now I'm believing his words, when he says he will remove my mark and my sisters. I feel I can't trust him. I wish I knew what's happening." Hancock was making a series of inquiries about her situation, unaware that she was contracting the most fatal disease a queen of the Amazon lily could acquire. Perhaps it was Luffy's promise, perhaps because he was not enchanted by her beauty like all the others, perhaps it was his strength, his conversation and ambitions, or even his beauty, because Hancock had to admit that Luffy was the most handsome man she had ever seen. But one thing was certain, Hancock had been struck by the arrow of love just one day after meeting this man, and her condition would only worsen being so close to the person her heart began to develop a passion for. Chapter 198, Boa Hancock 07, Smut. Luffy and Hancock spent their days training, each day ending in a draw without Luffy being able to use his fruit to enhance his status. However, he was satisfied that his body was naturally as powerful as this 7 warlords of the seas. "Do you like these clothes? We now look like some kind of Adam and Eve," Luffy commented with a smile to the woman in front of him. Both were wearing garments made from trees, covering only their private parts. "Adam and Eve?" Hancock asked, unaware of whom Luffy was talking about. "Never mind, it's just a story from a not very well-known religion in this world," Luffy commented. "Tell me now," she demanded, but without her usual arrogance. "Okay, in the beginning, there was nothing in the universe." Luffy began to tell the biblical story from his past life. "So, this woman, Eve, was tempted to eat the fruit from the forbidden tree and made Adam do the same?" Hancock recounted the story as they walked together through the forest. "Yes, and then they say sin came, and both Adam and Eve lost paradise with the wrath of God. What a weak woman, she should never have listened to that snake," Hancock murmured as she glanced at Luffy, her face hiding an evident blush. "One should not betray their man," she said softly. "Anyway, it's a lost story, let's continue our competition," Luffy commented, and they continued to encounter creatures in the forest. Many of them already knew the couple from the last few days, where they were constantly beaten and would run away as soon as they saw the crazy pair. The animals began to run through the forest as the two chased after them at high speed, beating any within their reach. Eventually, at a certain place, dozens of animals were cornered against a cliff, and the beating began once again. "We're done." Luffy looked at the crowd of animals lying on the ground, crying and unconscious. Choosing one, he went to it and took its life to bring the carcass back to camp. Returning to the makeshift camp, Luffy and Hancock prepared food, with the woman also helping. In recent days, her behavior had changed significantly. She had become sweeter and started taking initiative so Luffy wouldn't have to do everything alone. Luffy knew he had developed some sort of relationship with Hancock during these days. He wasn't foolish not to notice her looking at him often, as if trying to unravel the mystery. He tried to handle the situation without getting too involved, but lately, it had been difficult, especially since he hadn't slept with anyone in almost 2 weeks. Hancock was a very attractive woman, fitting her title of the world's most beautiful woman, even though he had someone to place before her in terms of beauty. Not that he thought beauty was everything because, of all the women, Robin was the one he felt most affectionate towards, if he excluded Lucy from the equation. Nonetheless, he would never deny any of them love and would do everything to make them happy by his side, trusting them all to be good wives and great mothers. "Here, why don't you try my broth?" Hancock approached with a broth she had created herself, quite haphazardly, based on what she had seen Luffy do. Luffy took it with a small smile and tasted it, while Hancock looked on with a gleam of expectation almost pressed against him. Luffy tasted it and nearly choked. "This is horrible," he screamed internally, his gaze shifting to Hancock, who looked at him expectantly. He forced a smile. "It's great," he said, not wanting to discourage the woman looking at him that way. "However, it needs some adjustments." He did not fail to mention. "Really? That's good, but what does it need?" Luffy began to explain the entire recipe, and Hancock seemed not to realize that she had to start from scratch to make her food good. Luffy and Hancock went to their lake again to wash off the sweat from the day's fight. Another thing happening was that neither of them had gone to the bathroom since they had been together, and neither seemed bothered by it. As they stood side by side, Luffy looked at his hand as it turned black with hockey. "I may not have my Momo no Mi to speed up training, but these days haven't been wasted," Luffy commented. He had significantly improved his proficiency with armament hockey, but it was his observation hockey that had developed the most during this time. "I can't deny it's been beneficial, perhaps it will make me less dependent on my fruit," she commented beside him and looked at Luffy. "Since not everyone can be charmed by my beauty." Luffy looked at her for a moment and couldn't help but say, "Not everyone can act like an idiot around you, but that doesn't mean they can't be charmed either," Luffy murmured, looking into her eyes. Hancock felt her heart beat faster than usual. "What do I do? Did he say he's also charmed by this empress? Is this a declaration? Is this man finally succumbing to my charms? But why am I so nervous about this?" Hancock screamed internally, not knowing what to do, as her chest sped up and her face turned red. "Damn, Why did I say something so cliché? Luffy commented, embarrassed by what he had said, impulsively, but why does she seem so happy? Luffy noticed the sparkle igniting in Hancock's eyes as if she had received something very special. You know what? Screw it. Luffy decided, he couldn't stand another day without sex with this naked woman in front of him. She was no longer repulsive, and he would take her as his woman, not knowing what would happen next. Luffy approached without saying anything. Hancock was a bit surprised by this, but she didn't back away and let Luffy come closer to her lips. She felt her first kiss with a dazed look but soon closed her eyes, letting her natural instincts take over and her emotions control her behavior. They quickly progressed to more intense kisses as Luffy made her feel new emotions while he began to run his hand over her body, kissing her neck, eliciting moans from the pirate empress. Luffy moved from her neck to her breasts, wetting them with his mouth while one hand went to Hancock's groin. The empress moaned at this, never having felt anything like it in her life. She hated men, but on this night, she was giving herself to one her heart had fallen for, body and soul. Feeling that he had aroused her greatly, he picked her up and placed her on the edge of the lake. What are you doing? What is this? Hancock, lying naked on her back on the ground, asked what Luffy was doing as he, still in the lake, spread her legs to perform oral. Hancock was stunned but soon lost control of her body, becoming increasingly heated. Ah! She moaned. What is this? She exclaimed again, experiencing her first orgasm in life. Luffy smiled satisfied and emerged from the lake, approaching with his erect penis to the woman's groin. Do you want to continue? He asked, since she was still a virgin and they were doing this in the middle of the wilderness. She looked at him with the blush of her first orgasm and even more intense emotions and nodded positively. Luffy then penetrated her, carefully breaking her hymen, and once she got used to the penetration, he began to move faster as their emotions were reflected in their moans of pleasure and even love. Luffy was thrilled at the sight of one of the most beautiful women in the world from above as her breasts swung up and down vigorously while he felt the heat and pleasure inside her, making her moan madly. I'm feeling it again. Hancock exclaimed, looking at him while moaning with her mouth open, experiencing her second orgasm as Luffy increased his pace to join her. They climaxed together at that moment. Luffy let her rest a bit and then took her to the lake again. Hancock was now completely submissive to anything Luffy would do. They had sex in the water in various positions, doggy style, standing up, and sideways. Let me do it now. Hancock, after hours of having sex and now accustomed to it, took the initiative, looking at Luffy with love. She pressed him against the side of the lake and mounted him while looking at him. Instinctively, she began to bounce on his penis, feeling it enter her. For the next 2 hours, Hancock slapped her buttocks against the water without either of them climaxing as they looked at each other, strengthening the bond between them as they both gave in to carnal pleasure and the beginning of love they started to feel for one another. Their sex was unique, even for Luffy, who already had a harem. Hancock and he didn't stop there. The sun had risen on the horizon, and they continued changing positions to have more sex. They didn't even care about eating anything, just having sex with each other as the day went by, from moonlight to bright sun while they were still moaning. More hours passed without realizing the day had ended. They only finished the following morning. Luffy was lying on the ground, and Hancock was beside him, struggling to breathe. That was over 30 hours of sex. He commented in disbelief. He had spent 12 hours having sex with Yamato and Nami, but 30 hours was something he hadn't expected with the woman he met a few days ago. That was. I've never felt anything like it before. Hancock had to admit as she felt her private part burning after all that sex but was satisfied. We better eat something, Luffy said, and he prepared their breakfast. Both slept a bit and continued their training. At night, they didn't think twice before attacking each other to have sex. The couple's routine was to train and have sex, even forgetting to eat or sleep sometimes. This lasted for another 4 days, and they even walked hand in hand with a certain affection for each other. But soon, they decided it was time to return. Luffy and Hancock scoured the forest and finally found the place where the Mo had taken the key to the handcuffs, in a cave with many precious items, ignoring the other, which must have belonged to castaways on the island. He grabbed the key and finally released the handcuffs that bound them. But it was strange for both of them. They returned, and Hancock acted weirdly. Luffy had mentioned he had wives, and this seemed to upset her a bit. Sister. Both sisters exclaimed when they saw them coming out of the forest dressed in clean clothes, since Luffy had unlocked the store after removing the handcuffs and bought appropriate clothes. Sandersonia and Marigold, let's go, she said calmly, leaving the girls confused. The girls were a bit confused, wondering what was going on. Their sister didn't seem so arrogant anymore but even seemed upset with the man. Goodbye, Luffy. She looked at him still with a conflicted gaze. Goodbye, Hancock. Luffy also said goodbye in the same tone. As the sisters were forced to follow their sister, Casting questioning glances at Luffy, the pirate stayed at the camp. Sister. Sandersonia was going to speak, but Hancock just raised her hand, silencing them. I don't want to talk about it and don't ask me what happened, I just need to think. She said, not explaining what was happening, but her voice conveyed a certain sadness. She had her pride, learning that Luffy had women affected her, but her heart still wanted that man more than anything in life. She had to think about what she should do. She needed to seek advice, and Glorioso would be her best option when she returned to the kingdom, and her emotions were quite strange. Luffy had also given her a special, untraceable Den Mushi. She would contact him for their alliance and any other matter, so she wasn't worried about not being able to talk to this man. However, there was sadness in leaving him, which caused her great pain in her chest just with the thought of leaving the island. The sisters returned to the ship, relieving the crew members that Hancock was back well after a week trapped on that island with that man. Directly to Amazon Lily. Hancock gave the order and entered her room without time for anyone to react. She lay down on her arm and felt her chest hurt. What is this? Why do I feel so empty? I should leave. I must go to Amazon Lily, Glorioso will tell me what to do. She murmured until, at a moment, she felt something strange and vomited next to the bed without knowing what it was and wondering if she had contracted a disease. Chapter 199, The Disease of Passion. How strange. I hope things turn out well between us. Luffy commented, watching Hancock leave. He hadn't liked the woman much when he first met her, but ended up relating to her like any other woman. He knew she was upset because he said he had future wives and would stay with all of them. He knew this woman had her own pride and just hoped they would have the same kind of relationship once they saw each other again after she had some time to think about their relationship beyond the already established alliance. Luffy went back to his torn pants he had brought from the forest, put his hand in his pocket, and began to take out things he had left there last week. He took his sword and put it on his waist. He hadn't tested Ace since he made Teach put a fruit in it. He also took out a cage and made it grow. In this small cage that turned into a prison, Doflamingo and Page 1 appeared in normal size, both looking thinner than usual. Hello, sorry I took so long, I was solving some problems. Any of you hungry? Luffy smiled at the two men who stared back at him. Doflamingo didn't respond, just growled seeing that his situation was not good. Page 1, on the other hand, seemed more affected. You, pirate. Big Sister and Boss Kaido won't let this go. Page 1 said, a bit frustrated. Luffy shrugged and threw a piece of meat to them. Eat this, at least you won't die of hunger because of me. He said, going back to eating. Mugiwara. You really aren't afraid of anyone, but if I say it's not just Kaido I have protection from. Doflamingo spoke for the first time, not wanting to touch the meat, while Page 1 was eating without care, being very hungry after spending a week in the darkness of Luffy's pocket. Are you talking about your crew in Dressrosa or your connection to the Holy Land, former Tenri Obito? Luffy mocked, earning a raised eyebrow from Doflamingo. Lami told you about this? My brother must have spoken to her. He commented. Maybe, but I know you know a secret of the celestial dragons that can even make demands of the 5 elders, wouldn't you like to share that with me? Luffy looked at him and smiled, waiting for a positive response. You can't be serious. Although Doflamingo was a bit surprised that Luffy knew this information, he was stunned that this pirate expected him to share his secrets. What a pity. Luffy might have looked hopeful for a response, but he already knew Doflamingo would never share it, and he shrugged, going back to his food. You know, Doflamingo, my crew is still missing a maid. I had one a while back, but she became my navigator. I hope one shows up for me to recruit soon. Luffy commented without turning his face while thinking of a certain woman ideal for the job. What are you planning? Doflamingo growled, understanding that Luffy was talking about Baby 5. Nothing much, just hoping your crew will come to rescue you, after all, you're their captain. Luffy commented, wanting Buffalo and Baby 5 to come here, and they would do so even knowing that Luffy defeated Joker. Luffy went back to the cage, and shrunk it again with Page 1 complaining, Doflamingo hadn't eaten, and Luffy didn't care about him. He put them back in his pocket and started to stretch. Well. Now let's train hockey with my multiplication for another week here, even though I initially didn't like being stuck with Hancock without using my powers, that last week gave me a solid foundation for hockey training, and that's beneficial for me to learn even faster. Luffy commented and started walking towards the forest. He trained all day but realized he had conquered the entire island. So, he left before dusk, looking for another island and found a larger one after traveling at high speed for 2 hours. Here, the animals were truly more powerful. 3 days later, with intense training, in addition to his hockey, his devil fruit had leveled up, reaching 70 times its maximum power, which Luffy wasted no time in developing. That particular day, His suspicions were confirmed when a shadow appeared over him, and Luffy saw 2 members of the Don Quixote pirates flying over the island. "You damn pirate! Give back Joker, because I want to kill him!" shouted the woman, transforming her arm into a machine gun and firing at Luffy. The bullets exploded the ground around him while he stood still. After the dust settled, Luffy appeared to be in the same place, seemingly unharmed by the woman's attack. "He's still okay," Buffalo shouted. "Take this." Baby 5 transformed all her limbs into cannons and rocket launchers, firing directly at Luffy, who didn't move as the missiles advanced towards him. Boom. 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 The explosion subsided, and Luffy appeared just looking at them from the middle of the crater. "They are persistent, I admit." "What do you think, Greg?" Luffy commented, turning his head to look at a gorilla looking a bit lost. This was Greg, an animal that Luffy ended up making his pet while he was beating and taming him. "GRR?" The gorilla didn't know what to say about this human, who had received those explosions and seemed to be fine. "Greg, can you take care of the flying man? I want to see how strong you are after training you. I've told you that a pirate also needs a monkey, and I ended up choosing you, but I don't want a weak monkey," Luffy said with a threat in his tone, and Greg, afraid of becoming this man's meal, advanced to the sky after much training in the past few days. Buffalo didn't even know where that giant who jumped in the air and appeared next to him came from. Before he could react, Greg punched him, sending him to the ground knocked out. Buffalo? Baby 5, a bit surprised by this, didn't even see Luffy next to her in the air. "I wouldn't be too worried about him," Luffy commented and smiled at the stunned woman. Luffy grabbed her by the waist and looked into her eyes before she could attack him. "I need you, Baby 5," he said, leaving the woman speechless. She looked at him for a while before asking, "You need me?" She was alarmed and happy at the same time. "Yes, I need a maid on my ship, and you are perfect?" he said, and she quickly exclaimed, "Yes. You need me." She agreed quickly. "That's great." Luffy smiled at the woman, despite there being no system message that she had really joined his crew. Luffy landed on the ground, let go of the woman's waist, and went to where Buffalo had fallen, defeated by Greg. "You took too long to defeat him, I'm going to make you train 3 times harder." Luffy looked at him seriously. "GRR." Greg started crying, already imagining the hell his training would be in the coming days. Meanwhile, the Kuja pirates' ship finally arrived at Amazon Lily. "Hancock-sama has arrived." The women shouted at the port, finally seeing the ship anchoring. Hancock had stayed in her room the entire time at sea, not going out for anything but to order food. Her sisters were very worried about her. Hancock was behaving strangely, and they noticed that sometimes she seemed dejected with nausea on her face. But even when asking and trying to understand their sister, Hancock refused to speak about anything or accept their help. "Sister." Marigold saw Hancock leaving her room heading for the port. "Let's go straight to the palace, later I want to see Gloriosa," she said, leaving through the port, leading the way with a stern face. As she continued on her way, the women shouted her name with hearts in their eyes, but Hancock ignored it all. An elderly lady among the crowd saw something strange in Hancock with a newspaper in her hands. "What happened to her?" Gloriosa exclaimed, watching the Empress heading towards the palace. Hancock wasted no time taking a bath and locking herself in her room, lying on the bed still pondering over her experiences from the last week, the new experiences, and emotions she had gone through. "Why do I still think about that man? Why do I still wish I had stayed on that island with him?" she murmured. "Why do I miss him so much, and why does it hurt so much to be away from him?" Hancock murmured, creating tears in her eyes. Her sadness and chest pain were quite intense as she thought about what she had lived through. Once again, she felt nauseous, turning to vomit next to the bed without being able to go anywhere else. I've been like this for days, is this because I'm away from him? What's happening?" she murmured, and on the other side of the room, Hancock's sisters finally decided to call Gloriosa when night fell. "Are you saying Hancock has been like this since she was chained to a man with a sea stone cuff for a week in a forest? After fighting with the notorious Monkey D. Luffy who is taking all the world's attention today?" Gloriosa couldn't believe what she was hearing, shouting alarmed, first about the encounter between Luffy and the Kuja pirates in the Calm Belt, second that Hancock for some reason, spent days with this pirate alone in the forest and returned strange. "Yes," Sandersonia commented, lost. "We don't know what's happening with her. We are quite worried, and she has been having a lot of nausea, she must be sick," Marigold commented. Nausea? Gloriosa shouted alarmed while stuttering. "Is it very serious, Gloriosa?" Sandersonia asked, worried. "Yes, it's very serious, let me see her immediately," Gloriosa demanded, and they went to the bedroom door. "Sister. Gloriosa is here to see you," Marigold said. "Some other time, I'm not well enough to see her now, later," Hancock said from the other side, but before Marigold could respond, the old lady jumped and kicked the door open forcefully. "Hancock!" Gloriosa announced her arrival. "What do you want, you old woman? I said I would see you later," Hancock complained, but her voice was very weak. "Hancock! Your condition." She looked alarmed at the woman and saw the vomit by the side of the bed, leaving her trembling. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Gloriosa shouted, alarmed, not knowing if what she was seeing and feeling was real or not. Hancock looked at her frustrated. She didn't want the old woman to see her in that state, but she realized she didn't know what to do, and with trembling hands clutching the sheet, struggling to breathe, tears began to run down her face. Her sisters entered and were stunned by Hancock's condition. They had never seen her so fragile since. "Tell me then what's happening to me, what's wrong?" Hancock exclaimed, crying. "Hancock, what happened between you and that man on that island?" Gloriosa asked, still dazed, but already knowing the answer to that. "What do you mean what happened between the two, Gloriosa? Did that man do something wrong to the sister?" Sandersonia and Marigold spoke with anger and concern. Hancock didn't respond. She didn't know what to say about her days, but ended up speaking without being able to control her voice. "I spent the best days of my life," she said, hesitating, but when she said the last part, her face, even though still in tears, became radiant. There was a glow that none of those present had ever seen in Hancock before. Both Gloriosa and the sisters made comical faces when they heard this. Looking at Hancock, Gloriosa saw Hancock return to her sad and conflicted face again and sighed. "Hancock, you've contracted a unique illness and it could kill you." Gloriosa spoke softly, still lost. "The elder sister could die?" Marigold shouted, coming out of her daze. "Yes, Hancock, you." She looked at Hancock, who had started to tear up again while looking at Gloriosa with very sad eyes. "You have the disease that every empress of this kingdom acquires at some point in their life. You have the disease of love. You're in love with Monkey D. Luffy, aren't you?" she said softly. "In love?" Hancock murmured, looking at her hands as tears fell on them. "Do I love that man?" she asked herself, even though she already knew the answer when she felt her heart ache upon hearing the question. Both Sandersonia and Marigold had wide eyes and open mouths upon hearing what they just heard. "It seems a man has finally caught your attention, Hancock. But now you must make a decision between choosing love and your responsibilities as the Empress of Amazon Lily. Do I have to choose between Luffy and this kingdom?" She looked at Gloriosa with a lost gaze. "Yes, however, all the previous queens who chose their responsibility died shortly after, as love consumed them." Gloriosa spoke in a serious tone. "The elder sister is going to die?" the sisters exclaimed upon hearing this, looking worriedly at Hancock. "Yes." Gloriosa spoke sincerely. "But he already has other women." Hancock finally spoke, her pride wounded. She knew deep down that she loved this man from the day she gave herself to him, but the idea that she had to share him irritated her like never before. "What do you expect?" "From what I've heard, he is someone who appeared on the sea unprecedentedly and is growing like never before. The government will do everything to eliminate him." Gloriosa thought about all the chaos Monkey D. Luffy is causing in this sea. "What? They're going to try to kill him?" Hancock shouted at that moment, releasing her haki in anger that she rarely had, an anger she only had when Luffy discovered about her brand. "Calm down, Hancock, it doesn't mean he's going to die. You know of his achievements, he was not a man so easily defeated. You know this." Gloriosa shouted, fighting against Hancock's haki, as all the other women in the castle began to faint. Because Hancock didn't control it, she just released it with her anger. "But he's in danger, isn't he?" Hancock asked, concerned. She really cared about Luffy's safety at that moment. "See, Hancock, even though you still have your pride, you love him and care for him," Gloriosa commented. Hancock didn't respond. "Even if you don't want to share him, you must make this decision, decide to live with the man you love and his other wives, or live and even die with a wounded heart denying your love, but either way, you and he are already connected," Gloriosa commented seriously. "What do you mean?" Hancock looked at her and followed the old woman's gaze to her belly. "Your nausea, it's not an illness. You are pregnant, there are 2 children growing in your womb at this moment." She finished serenely, feeling the lives forming with her observation haki. Marigold. Sandersonia. The 2 sisters had comic eyes with huge mouths at that moment, while Gloriosa closed her eyes and crossed her arms. "I'm pregnant." Hancock looked at her stomach while placing her delicate hand over her skin. "What?" The scream was collective as everyone in Amazon Lily heard. "Raccoon here, do you want a reaction of Shakayaku and Rayleigh hearing this news?" Chapter 200, Marriage. In a bar on a part of the Sabati archipelago, a bar dawned quiet with only 2 people inside before the establishment opened. I don't know why, but I feel like my day is going to change in the next few minutes. Rayleigh commented while drinking his first bottle of alcohol of the day. You're always so pessimistic. Shakayaku commented beside him. Anyway. Just as Rayleigh was about to comment, the den-den-mushi behind the bar counter began to ring. Gloriosa? Shakayaku asked, looking at the den-den-mushi. Ketcha. As soon as the signal went off, Gloriosa spoke from the other side. Shakayaku, is that you? She asked with a tone that was uncommon for the lady to speak. Yes, what's up, did something happen? Shakayaku asked, and Rayleigh stopped drinking to listen to what seemed urgent. Listen, something happened, something big. The woman said. What happened? Shakayaku asked, raising an eyebrow. Listen. Hancock is pregnant with twins. Gloriosa exclaimed. Shakayaku. Really a silence settled in the bar at that moment. Can you repeat that? I think I didn't understand. Shakayaku had to ask again. She's pregnant, by the pirate monkey D. Luffy. I don't know many details, but they were stranded on an island for a week, that was the result. Gloriosa exclaimed. Shakayaku. Ha 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 ha. Rayleigh began to laugh upon hearing this. How is that possible? That woman hates men. Shakayaku asked with a quite surprised tone. Like I said, I don't know the details, but that's what happened, and Hancock is freaking out here. Gloriosa said. What? What are you doing? Where is the father? The woman exclaimed. The father doesn't even know Hancock is pregnant, he's somewhere in the comm belt from what they told me, but let me tell you what happened with Hancock. Start of the flashback. I'm pregnant? Hancock murmured, looking at her belly as she touched it after hearing the news. Sister. Marigold was dazed beside her brother. Leave me. Hancock immediately shouted, she wanted to be alone after learning about this. But sister. Her other sister was going to speak. Just leave me, I want to be alone, we'll talk tomorrow. Hancock exclaimed, and the two sisters along with Gloriosa had to leave the room. Gloriosa ended up staying in the castle that night and waited until the morning when Hancock finally came out of the room. The woman walked with closed eyes and sat in front of her sisters and the lady. I've made up my mind. She spoke still with her eyes closed. The other three women swallowed hard, waiting for the pirate empress to speak. We will continue with an alliance with the Monkey D. Luffy pirates, and as with any alliance, the best way to cement it is with a marriage. She opened her eyes and Hancock spoke with a tone never heard before, and her face looked like a girl in love. As she placed her hand on her cheek saying the possible names of her daughters, since all of the women of Amazon Lily give birth to girls. All three women listening to this and seeing how Hancock acted, were shocked. End of the flashback. That's what happened. Gloriosa commented on the den-den-mushi. Well. That's quite unexpected. Shakayaku said, a bit lost. It seems they formed an alliance, this is very interesting. Ha 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 ha. Who would have thought the boy would even charm that woman? And it looks like he already has Kaido's daughter. Ha 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 ha. Rayleigh seemed in good spirits, his intuition was right, but his day got better and not worse with this. What is she trying to do now? Shakayaku asked. Well. She is. Gloriosa spoke cautiously, because on her side, the sisters were holding Hancock back as she tried to reach the den-den-mushi in front of her. Stop, sister. He must be busy. Marigold pleaded. No. I need to talk to him. If he doesn't want this empress, why doesn't he answer the phone? Did I do something wrong and he's mad? This empress should not have left him. And if he doesn't want to marry me? Our children cannot be bastards. Hancock spoke like a girl while trying to call Luffy, but he wasn't answering. Meanwhile, on an island in the comm belt, Luffy had no idea how his life would be turned upside down upon learning he became a father, but as he was oblivious to this fact, he was sitting at his camp eating and reading, while a woman dressed as a maid fanned him. My maid. Can you put away this coffee cup? Luffy casually asked. Of course, Master Luffy. She said excitedly, as Luffy needed her. But as soon as she took the cup, her expression changed, and she threw the cup on the ground, breaking it, while her arm transformed into a cannon pointed directly at Luffy. Without having time to react, she fired the cannon at point-blank range at Luffy. The explosion lifted dust all over the place, and Luffy appeared fine, even his chair was still undamaged. Good thing I bought a more durable chair, otherwise, it would have ended up like the last and I had to buy. Luffy commented while looking satisfied. In recent days, he had been enjoying his days with Baby 5, training with his assistant. She made his life easier. He did not stop training her either. You damaged my newspaper. I'm going to have to punish you in training. Luffy spoke seriously. No. Baby 5 screamed while kneeling on the ground. Why is the master immune to blades, bullets, cannonballs, missiles? Nothing I do can hurt him. He is going to punish me again. She cried while already spanking herself. anticipating what was to happen to her. Anyway, today will be our last day of training on this island. We're going back. I need to stop by Skypiea before making a final stop. Luffy spoke and took the crying maid to train another day again. As soon as he finished, he checked his Den Mushi and saw 30 missed calls from Hancock. What's this? Did something happen? Luffy commented and picked up the Den Mushi. Catcha. Hello? Luffy. Hancock shouted from the other side with a tone that surprised Luffy. Hancock? Did something happen? He asked, bewildered. Yes. Hancock spoke in the same tone. On the other side of the line, Hancock's sisters saw her suddenly shift from her love-struck face to a more serious one as she narrowed her eyes and seemed to revert to her old self. We need to meet to solidify our alliance, she said in a more arrogant tone. We need to meet? Why? We can say we're already allies. Luffy was confused. It wasn't necessary to solidify the alliance between him and the Kuja pirates. He ignored Hancock's change in tone, already used to the very volatile woman. No. We need to meet. She was firm. All right. But let me finish some business. We'll meet as soon as I'm done with everything. Luffy spoke. Okay. Until our meeting. Hancock spoke in an arrogant tone, and Luffy hung up the Den Mushi. As soon as the Den Mushi was hung up in the castle on Amazon Lily, the onlookers looked at Hancock unsure of what to say, with her strange behavior. Gloriosa. Marigold. Sandersonia, he agreed. Does this mean we're going to get married at our meeting? Hancock switched her posture from an arrogant woman to a love-struck woman, placing her hands on her cheeks like a teenager. Hancock, why didn't you tell him you're pregnant with his child? Gloriosa asked, confused. Isn't it obvious? It'll be a surprise, she said with the same face. We should choose the names for our daughters, maybe Luffy and Hancock. That's it, she said excitedly while Sandersonia and Marigold just sighed at this. I still think Hancock is hiding something, Luffy commented while putting away his Den Mushi and looked at the woman quite hurt by his side from the training. Let's go baby 5, it's time to go back. Luffy approached and began to heal his maid. Of course, master, she said with a blush after her punishment. Luffy then left the island. He had to return to Skypiea before doing something big, as he needed Bappu for this. He took off with baby 5 in his arms. Buffalo, Doflamingo, and page 1 continued in his pocket. It was all calm as Luffy flew at high speed, until he encountered a very familiar ship. This is Foxy, he exclaimed. Do you know him, master? Baby 5 spoke in his lap. She had a pistol pointed at Luffy's head, as she tried to kill him several times while they flew, but Luffy was not hurt by it and did not care for her as if she was just another mosquito trying to bite him. Yes, let's catch them, Luffy announced and flew towards the ship at that moment. Captain. There's a man approaching flying, a crew member said while looking at Luffy approaching them with his enormous wings. Who dares? Noro no me, he shouted and launched a beam at Luffy, who dodged it with ease. How aggressive, let's finish this quickly, Luffy commented before releasing his new level of Conqueror's Haki that he managed to achieve in the last few days. The explosion made everyone, even Foxy, fall to the ground unconscious. Amazing. Baby 5 couldn't help but comment from the side. That was pretty easy, Luffy said, satisfied with his new power. He approached the ship and shrunk it to a small size to fit in his pocket. Great, Foxy will be a good addition to the fleet, Luffy commented, and went back to flying. They didn't take long to finally spot the Sky Island. Let's go, maid, let's meet our crew. Luffy spoke satisfactorily as he looked at the island in the distance with some colossal creatures fighting one another. What are those monsters? Baby 5 exclaimed. Luffy? Yamato approached excitedly and looked at Baby 5. Who is this woman? Hello Yamato, let's have a feast. My coming here is brief, I need to return. I'm placing a new crew I recruited and our ship's made here. Luffy smiled. After his arrival, everyone gathered, asking Luffy about what he had done. He had to buy another newspaper on the way, since Baby 5 destroyed the one he had stolen from the Kuja pirates. His feats had left everyone astonished with that. But after the surprise and the details, Luffy had a feast with his crew and allies. Hey, Luffy. Where is Enel? He went down with you, right? Usopp asked. He was much stronger and confident. He didn't seem like the Usopp from the same time in the original. I left him on an island in the calm belt with a sea stone to train. I hope he comes out at least with her armament Haki, Luffy commented. The night continued, and Luffy finally went to the cabin with all his women to catch up on his weeks without them. He did not sleep that night and had to use his powers to cover the sound. He woke up in bed with several naked women spread out, even with Baby 5 among them, since she seemed to have fallen in love after being saved by Luffy several times, but that didn't stop her from trying to kill him at times. Luffy had breakfast with his crew and made another announcement. I'm leaving for a few days, will return as soon as I finish our last things, and you should continue training. Luffy declared. He left Foxy and Baby 5 for his crew to take care of them. Now I will take one of you with me. Luffy spoke again, and while everyone was confused, he picked up Bippo, who was scared by the captain, and flew into the sky. I'm taking Bippo with me because I'm going to need him. See you in a week. Luffy announced and cut through the clouds again as Bippo screamed in fear of the height, and the speed of Luffy increased by 70 times. Luffy had a goal at this moment, the float fruit model, flying human devil fruit. Chapter 201, Shiki 01. In some sky islands, not being Skypiea and near the East Blue, a birdman carrying a large polar bear by the arm arrived at the islands from a distance. Captain. Can we stop? I can't take it anymore. Bippo complained, crying while looking quite dazed, being carried by Luffy through the sky for the last few days at several kilometers per hour. Luffy looked at him and let go. Bippo, I'm going to fight someone powerful here, I need you to take some distance because this fight will be quite dangerous for you. Luffy commented while looking at the islands. Bippo, falling, quickly used moonwalk and looked at the captain with a bit of fear. Someone powerful? What place is this? He finally noticed the islands flying in the sky. This is where Shiki, one of the relics of the past, has been hiding in recent years. Luffy said with a smile. Shiki? The golden lion? Bippo realized at that moment, knowing the records of his fruit. Yes. I will fight him, you take some distance and stay until the fight is over. Luffy said, preparing to head to the islands. Wait a moment, Captain. You can fight against Shiki? He was very powerful, and why am I here? You still haven't told me. Bippo exclaimed, but when he saw Luffy's look at him. I'm sorry. He shouted again. Why are you apologizing? Luffy murmured and went back to speaking. Listen, Bippo. He is now just a shadow of his past, he has lost much strength, in addition to his age, when he cut his feet. Luffy commented, and without waiting for Bippo to respond, he raised his wings and shot towards the islands. Luffy quickly approached the place and looked at the floating structures, thinking how he could lure Shiki out of them. Shiki was sitting in an empty room when suddenly, he looked up, feeling a very strange presence in the air. What is this? Someone is invading my territory? He murmured with a slight growl. Before Shiki could react, an explosion of Conqueror's Haki came from the sky. Shiki. Come out from wherever you are and come here, your era should have ended a long time ago and I am here to end you, but don't worry. You will end your life at the hands of the man who will conquer all the seas of this world. Luffy shouted. He would have no mercy on Shiki. The man is planning to send all these islands to the East Blue and destroy them with the impact and monsters, all because he had not forgotten his old boyfriend, Goldie Roger. Shiki blew the roof of his house and took off into the air. Who are you? How do you know I'm here? Shiki growled at the man with large wings waiting for him to approach. My name is Monkey D. Luffy, today I am a hunter and you are my prey. Luffy spoke in a threatening tone. I am your prey? You're just a brat who came here to die. Shiki commented and looked at Luffy more closely. Monkey D. Isn't that the same surname as Garp? He asked. Yes, Garp is my grandfather. Luffy shrugged. That's good, after all, I can tell Garp that I killed his grandson, I can't wait to see his face when he finds out, Shia-ha-ha. Shiki exclaimed, laughing. You should at least consider if you could do it and not boast, but I understand. You haven't received newspapers for months, otherwise you would know that you will die here, at the hands of a man from the East Blue. Luffy provoked with a smile. Shiki stopped laughing and looked at Luffy, raising an eyebrow. These young people today don't even know Shiki, the Golden Lion, the one who terrorized the sea one day. He exclaimed. Yes, one day. But now he is just a relic, a shadow of his past. Luffy continued to retort. TSK, it looks like I'll have to finish you quickly. Shiki commented and launched an attack on Luffy. He moved two giant stones standing near him and launched them towards the pirate in the air. Luffy didn't move, seeing the huge rocks coming towards him. He would fight differently against Shiki at that moment, using his more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit. He made his body start to grow 7 times. What? The growth fruit? Then why does he have wings? Or is it a special zone? Shiki murmured, looking at a 15-meter-tall Luffy. The rocks approached, and Luffy punched them with his bare hands, exploding them into boulders. As it wasn't just his size that grew, his strength increased as well. Let's start, Shiki, I hope you show some of your power. Luffy commented, knowing he could beat Shiki, but wanting a more interesting fight. Luffy flew towards Shiki before he could respond and punched him with a Haki-infused fist, causing Shiki to go into a defensive position, but the impact was too great as he was launched backward, flying to the ground of the island from which he had emerged. Boom! His body exploded against the ground, raising a large amount of dust. "Boss Shiki!" A group of men rushed to the site, shouting worriedly for their captain. "Who is this invader?" "Shoot the giant!" one of the men yelled before pointing a gun towards Luffy and starting to shoot. Luffy just stood still. Some bullets passed close to him, but the distance was so great that he doubted it would hurt even an animal there. "Stop shooting!" A voice emerged from the crater, and Shiki climbed out of the hole a bit injured. He glared at Luffy while blood dripped from his forehead. "You have enraged me, boy. I admit you are strong and know hockey, but I want to see you survive this," Shiki announced, and the islands around began to move, making a sound echoing through the region as if there was an earthquake. "What is this?" Vippo watched from afar with a mix of admiration and terror as the floating islands began to move. He was on a small cloud, using his moonwalk ability to stay elevated and safe as his captain had asked. Even from afar, the view was impressive and frightening. The islands, which before seemed serene and immobile, now spun and moved on top of each other. "The captain is really going to fight someone capable of doing this," he murmured to himself, his tone showing doubt and fear. Suddenly, the giant islands began to move even faster, and purple lights began to obscure the sunlight as they exploded against the ground at that distance. Vippo now saw his captain fighting a type of battle he had never witnessed before. He watched, the shockwaves spreading through the sky, distorting the light around and sending clouds racing. Many of the islands, now fragmented by Luffy's power, looked like runaway comets, creating trails of dust and debris in the air. It was an aerial battlefield, where gravity seemed to have been forgotten. "Captain, please, be okay," Vippo exclaimed, hoping Luffy would be fine. He would enter the fight, but this was too much for him as he watched all the chaos, now a large dust cloud in the midst of it with purple explosions emerging in the middle. On the islands, Shiki's soldiers and animals seemed even more scared, because chaos had covered them at that moment. "Watch out!" Boom! A rock fell close to them after Luffy exploded the tip of an island with his flames. "Look!" the man shouted before a giant gorilla fell on top of him from another island. Both men and animals were in trouble as they fell from the islands or exploded in flames while Luffy fired upon them. "Ha ha 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 ha! Shia ha ha!" What was stranger was a giant sending flames and a man with swords in place of his legs laughing amidst all that chaos. "This is really fun," Luffy commented amidst the smoke cloud that his flames created after exploding many islands. "Indeed, it's been a while since I've had this much fun," Shiki exclaimed, always a lover of chaos. Seeing him fight with everything while the opponent seemed to be on par with him was refreshing, reminding him of his old times. Boom 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 boom. Luffy continued to explode everything that came near him. His flames were 7 times larger, due to his increased size, so he could really cause chaos with all those rocks coming towards him. Sensing Shiki with his observation hockey, he fired a fireball at him, ignoring the approaching islands. "Shia ha ha!" Shiki laughed, but felt danger coming from a light approaching in the midst of the dust clouds. He moved 2 huge rocks to protect himself quickly. Boom! The rocks exploded, but that didn't prevent Luffy's explosion from reaching Shiki. The impact hit him, throwing him far away. "Ah, that hurt," Shiki murmured after stabilizing in the air, feeling the heat of the flames that hit him. "Come on Shiki. I'm right here," Luffy said approaching, and Shiki looked at him, sending new rocks. "Don't underestimate this legend," Shiki shouted and sent various mountains towards Luffy, who quickly exploded them, sending debris in all directions. Luffy continued flying towards him, dodging by the side of another mountain that Shiki moved towards him, reaching it after circling and punching the man again, making him explode into the same mountain in the air. Boom! Shiki entered the mountain before it exploded again, showing the pirate even more injured. "Damn, you're good, kid, better than I imagined, but I'm still Shiki, the Golden Lion. I used to kill arrogant brats like you every day in my time," he exclaimed, releasing his conqueror's hockey, but much weakened than it once was. "I understand your determination, Shiki. I may not like you and want to kill you, but I still respect you as an opponent and what you once were," Luffy commented as he deactivated his size, returning to 210 centimeters. Shiki looked at him with a bit of curiosity, despite being quite injured and wanting to kill this boy. "You talk as if you could already kill me," he commented. "Well, if you can't resist this, then you will die. I'm going to change my fighting style. It's time to test this sword with the devil fruit I put in it," Luffy commented as he took his sword out of his pocket and made it grow back to its original size. "Wait. That sword. How did you get it?" Shiki could never mistake the hilt of that sword, he recognized it anywhere. "Yes, this is Ace, the sword that your old boyfriend used. It's time for me to test it and reap your life," Luffy commented as he grabbed the hilt and drew it from its sheath. The legendary sword shone against the sunlight that still passed through all the destruction. Luffy gripped it, and suddenly, It began to emit thunder around it, according to the power of the Parimsha-type devil fruit that Luffy had placed in it. Chapter 202, Shiki 02. Luffy let the power of the devil fruit in Ace flow. Yellow thunders began to surround it with red color. It was a special fruit that Luffy found for 2 billion in the store and found it quite interesting to fuse it with the sword. His main reason for going to Jaya was to find Teach. Seeing Doflamingo and Jack was a bit surprising, but that didn't stop him from enjoying the situation. He looked at Shiki quite shocked, looking at the sword strangely. "You have this sword. Do you think you are worthy to wield it, rookie?" Shiki exclaimed angrily as he released a bit of weakened Conqueror's haki, due to his current condition. "Stop crying over your boyfriend, let's continue the fight, you might even get the sword if you kill me." Luffy smiled as the thunders intensified around the metal. Then Luffy saw Shiki making his first move, heading towards him. He lifted his foot and attacked Luffy with his sword instead of the limb. Metal sound. Luffy just lifted Ace. "Let's see how I am as a swordsman these days," he murmured and counterattacked. Shiki did not fall behind. Even weakened, Shiki was fast. Luffy and Shiki began to repel each other in the sky. Large rocks and islands rushed at Luffy at that moment, but he began to cut the large stones and dodge the islands with his super speed. The battle was a show between two swordsmen, but at one point Luffy decided to use the power of the sword. An island was coming towards him and he moved away from Shiki to concentrate the power of the Parimsha in Ace. The sword began to emit a huge thunder coming from it and spreading to all sides. Luffy leaned the sword back and launched it forward, releasing its power. "What is this?" Shiki was scared for a moment, feeling quite a danger coming from it, and got out of the way. The explosion flew like a lightning bolt to the island. It was as fast as lightning. When it reached the island, a spectacle of destruction happened. With a flash covering the entire sky, a scarlet electrical explosion exploded from the island, which grew devastating all the land it touched, while the inhabitants and animals on that island tried to escape the attack, but it was too late. Boom! The explosion then covered the entire island, affecting everything around. Shiki was thrown through the sky while stabilizing himself. When he stopped, he looked at the immense clouds of dust with red lightning appearing around. "What is this?" The people around the island were shocked, trying to protect themselves from the gigantic explosion happening at that moment. They became even more alarmed when they saw just debris in the air of what would be a huge island until a while ago. He destroyed the entire island? Shiki could not be more shocked. His gaze returned to where Luffy should be, but he was no longer there, and feeling his presence, he was even more shocked that Luffy was next to him. "It was a good fight, Shiki, but I am stronger than you. But thank you for giving me an opportunity to use this power on your islands instead of an island in the lower sea. It would be quite problematic," Luffy commented casually and advanced against Shiki. He tried to defend himself while Luffy continued moving his sword quickly. But Shiki began to retreat as Luffy was gaining the upper hand. Cut in a moment, Luffy hit Shiki from the shoulder to his waist with a diagonal cut. "Ah!" he screamed as the blood spread. Shiki looked at him with clenched eyes and teeth. Luffy said nothing and continued advancing. Shiki was even more weakened while using his swords in place of legs to try to defend himself, but Luffy hit him at one point in the heart. Shiki looked at the sword embedded in his chest, feeling a lot of pain as he began to feel his life draining. "Shia ha 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 ha. You really beat me, kid." He suddenly started laughing, looking at Luffy, but he didn't seem to resist anymore at that moment. "Who would have thought that I, the Golden Lion, would die to an unknown in the middle of nowhere? A shame the world will not know of our fight." He lamented. As always, Shiki was eccentric and always imagined a grandiose death. "I understand, and I respect you for that. You were a great pirate in your era. However, times change and a new generation emerges to cover the old," Luffy said in a somewhat melancholic tone. "A new generation emerges," Shiki commented while coughing up blood. He looked at Luffy with a gleam in his eyes in his final moments. "You said you plan to conquer all the seas? You want to be greater than Roger?" he asked. "I will surpass the Pirate King. No, I will destroy the world government and declare myself the Emperor of all seas," Luffy commented. He planned to be the Emperor of the Sea, as the supreme pirate, but he did not have the ambition to control the world as the government does. He just wants to free the countries and let them be independent, but let the world know that the sea belongs to him. "Shia ha ha." Shiki started laughing again. "That's very good. I hope that as the man who defeated me, you achieve your goals, boy. My era is over." He gave a final statement while pushing the sword with his body to fall onto an island below. "Don't worry, I'll achieve that goal. And I'll take your fruit too. The world will never forget the power of the Golden Lion while one of my crewmates has its power," Luffy commented while watching the pirate fall. He noticed a small smile on Shiki as he finally died after hearing this. Luffy sighed and took his attention from the falling pirate, looking towards a cloud in the distance. "Bippo! Come here. His voice was amplified, and it didn't take long for a white ball with a purple jumpsuit and the symbol of the straw hats on his clothes to arrive close by while dodging all the floating debris. "Captain. Are you okay?" Bippo asked cautiously. He was a bit scared of his captain after seeing him destroying an entire island with that attack. Even Bippo at a distance had difficulty stabilizing. "I'm fine. Take this and eat it." Luffy threw a devil fruit that he had just bought in the store for 6 billion. "What is this, Captain?" Bippo asked, looking at the fruit. "Just eat it, we don't have much time," Luffy commanded again. "I'm sorry." Bippo yelled and ate the entire fruit, afraid of the captain. "What a horrible taste," he shouted while holding his throat with disgust. "You just ate the float fruit model, flying human devil fruit. You've received the power of Shiki," Luffy said with satisfaction. "What? I have the power of the legendary golden lion?" Bippo couldn't believe those words. Luffy was going to respond, but suddenly, a thunderous sound started from all sides. The islands were losing the effect of Shiki's power as soon as he died. "What's happening?" Indigo shouted, alarmed, on the main island. "The islands are falling." Scarlet shouted, alarmed, looking around. "We're going to die." A soldier screamed, running in fear. "Where is the captain? Do something." Another said. "If the islands are falling, it means Shiki is dead." Shiki's doctor commented. "That's impossible." Scarlet shouted. "Did you see that explosion that wiped out an entire island? The person who killed Shiki is really powerful. Now we're going to die." The doctor commented, already accepting his fate. Meanwhile, on several islands, animals ran from one side to the other looking for shelter, but they were in a situation where nothing could be done. "Captain. What should we do?" Bippo shouted, alarmed, looking at the islands starting their free fall. "You need to use your power, Bippo. I will help you lift all the islands," Luffy commented, grabbing Bippo's jumpsuit while activating his speed 70 times, disappearing the next moment. He made his way to all the islands, making Bippo touch and all the pieces of land while the islands. "What should I do, Captain?" Bippo, even touching all the islands, was still lost. "You have to try to use your power. You must have received something in your subconscious to use the ability. Try to do it," Luffy instructed, and Bippo closed his eyes, concentrating. Suddenly, all the falling islands began to slow down until they stabilized. "This." Shiki's doctor looked around, stunned as everything seemed stable again. He was sure that Shiki had died for the effect to stop. "Wait. Does this mean Captain Shiki is still alive?" Indigo shouted with joy. "The captain is alive." The men celebrated after those words. "Shiki is dead." A voice emerged behind the men at that moment, and they saw Luffy next to Bippo. Everyone immediately pointed their weapons at them, and Luffy used his Conqueror's Haki to bring everyone to their knees. "I'll give you a chance." Luffy lifted the dead body of Shiki and threw it in front of all of them. "You join my fleet, or you will be thrown off this island." Luffy smiled like a demon. Even Bippo beside him was frightened. "What? The captain died," Indigo said, crying while looking at the body of his captain. "It seems I was right," the doctor commented. "What will we do?" The men murmured while they were on their knees, unable to muster the will to stand. "Anyway, I'll give you 1 day to think about it," Luffy said, crossing his arms, and looked at the scientist who conducted experiments for Shiki, where he had modified all the animals on the islands. "You're the doctor who created these animals, right?" Luffy asked. "Yes." The man spoke submissively, still under the effect of Luffy's Conqueror's Haki. "Well, I want to see your research. I'm quite interested in it," Luffy commented. He could use these animals to train his crew. They would be perfect for it, and he could talk to Chopper, a drug specialist, to have him further refine these animals. They would be good for training and even for his future army. Luffy turned his attention to Bippo. "Take the islands to Skypiea. I'm going to make a call before I start looking into the research," Luffy commented, following the doctor inside the facilities after Luffy released him from his pressure. Meanwhile, he was calling Hancock to schedule their meeting to see what that woman wanted so much to meet him for, hoping she was missing them, and they would have to solve it with many hours of sex. "Ketcha. Hello." Luffy spoke. "Luffy," Hancock exclaimed like a love-struck girl, before her voice changed to someone more serious. "It's you," she said now as if he were just anyone, and Luffy just scratched his head trying to understand why she was acting like this. "Well, you wanted to meet with me. I'm still in the comm belt," he said. "Yes. Let's meet." She returned to her excited tone. Luffy and she scheduled a place while Bippo steered the islands to that position. Hancock's mood changed, sometimes seeming like a love-struck girl, other times like someone arrogant. Luffy didn't know how to deal with her or her real intentions for the meeting, but hung up the den mushi to meet her soon. He accepted. "I can't wait to tell him we'll have children. We're going to get married." Hancock screamed in her cabin while her sisters still looked at her, lost. She had been destroying the room since Luffy talked to her days ago because she was in front of the Den Mushi this whole time waiting for his call. However, they still looked at her strangely because their sisters seemed like two people at the same time. She switched personalities all the time while talking with Luffy, while the pirate went to see Shicky's research and the doctor, unaware that he would receive the biggest shock of his life in the coming days. Chapter 203, First Wife 01. Bippo led all the islands in the direction his captain had instructed, to make a brief stop before continuing. Luffy was in the scientist's laboratory while this was happening, since he was quite interested in the research on how they transformed the animals from these islands that Shiki had captured into powerful beasts. It seemed that all those who wanted to avenge Shiki were contained, and the next day they ended up joining Luffy's fleet since they didn't have much choice. But Luffy smiled satisfied. There were at least 1,000 men that Shiki had secretly recruited, and this would make a good army if they were properly trained. Finally, the islands arrived at the agreed location, and Luffy left the island and descended to the sea, where the Kuja pirate's ship was stationed. Approaching, he saw the people waiting for his arrival. Hancock looked at him with sparkles in her eyes while standing next to her sisters. Luffy landed softly. Despite some pirates questioning why he was there, they did not raise the issue seeing Hancock waiting for him. "Hello," Luffy commented after landing. "Luffy," she exclaimed, before coughing and trying to appear tougher, placing her hand on her waist. Her voice shifted from excited to a more forced tone as if she was trying to talk normally, but at the same time, it was noticeable that she was forcing it. "I'm glad you've arrived, Monkey D. Luffy, we need to talk," she said as her sisters sighed, accustomed to Hancock's volatile behavior over the last few days. "Yes, I'm here for that." Luffy spoke, a bit lost, not knowing why Hancock was acting like this. If she liked him as he imagined, there was no reason to act so tough and in such a forced manner. "Come with me," she said in a final tone, to follow her to the cabin. "Sister, are you going to talk to him alone?" Marigold asked. "Yes, this is a matter that only concerns me and him," Hancock spoke, and Luffy scratched his head even more at what seemed to be a mystery beyond the possible alliance made between them. Luffy followed Hancock, and in the room, a small table with chairs, where Hancock was going to sit. However, what caught Luffy's attention were the posters of him hanging on the wall of the Empress's room and even some sheets with stick figure drawings of a couple and two children looking happy. "Hey, what's going on here?" Luffy was a bit scared to be honest. "Sit down," Hancock spoke with the same forced voice, and Luffy calmly sat in front of her. "I'll be honest, we are interested in our alliance, but there's a condition," Hancock spoke. "I'm listening, Hancock," Luffy spoke, and this seemed like an arrow through Hancock's heart. "He called me by my name," she said internally while striking a pose, feeling her heart being hit. "She is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen, but this is definitely strange and hard to get used to," Luffy murmured, observing Hancock's reaction. "Well, like any alliance, there is only one way to conclude the pact," Hancock spoke, looking at Luffy with bright eyes. "Which is a marriage." She again had the passionate voice she always had. "Well, that's expected since we spent days on that island. I always intended to marry you, Hancock." Luffy spoke with a smile to the woman this time. He intended to make her his wife, so he was not surprised. "You accepted?" she asked, almost shocked, not believing what she heard. "Yes. Let's get married." Luffy shrugged. "Happiness," Hancock shouted as she jumped across the table to sit in Luffy's lap. Luffy did not reject Hancock, letting her attack him, after a while with her seeming quite happy, and he looked at her grabbing his hand and placing it on her stomach. "This is good, because we're going to have children," she simply said with a bright smile. Luffy stopped looking at her at that moment. He was still processing what this woman was talking about. Instinctively he felt his hand on her stomach and sensed something in her womb with hockey. It was true, there were presences forming. "I'm going to be a father." Luffy seemed quite shocked by this, as it was the most surprising news he had ever received in this world. "Yes, we're going to have 2 children," Hancock said excitedly. "What are we waiting for then? Let's get married right here, immediately." "How are you taking care of the children?" Luffy spoke quickly, not wanting to waste time. "Well, we can do it on Amazon Lily if you want, but we don't need a best man or anything like that," Hancock, although happy and excited, reasoned. "Best man? I have Bippo, let's do this now." Luffy didn't want to waste time, since he was going to be a father. It was his responsibility not to leave the children without his name. "Yes." Hancock also didn't want to waste time. They continued discussing, but now they were more like a couple excited about the news. They talked about how this would be planned and ended up choosing Amazon Lily itself for the celebration. Bippo appeared after Luffy called him with a Den Mushi, and he came quite curious about what his captain wanted. Then Hancock stepped out of the cabin and announced that she would marry Luffy, saying it was an alliance, which shocked everyone. Even Beppo was taken by surprise. The polar bear touched the ship's side and began to levitate it towards Amazon Lily with the floating islands. Meanwhile, Luffy had already started his honeymoon in advance, isolating the room sound and spending his days without eating, drinking, just taking baths with his future wife and mother of his 2 daughters. They've been in that room for days. Sandersonia commented looking at the room. There's nothing we can do about it. Our sister is going to get married. I still can't believe that up until a few weeks ago, she hated men, now she's in love and pregnant with one. Marigold commented beside her. At least she seems happy, and if he keeps his word, we'll be rid of these marks. Sandersonia said with some hope. The other crew members were processing everything they were hearing about the marriage. Not even the fact that the ship was flying with the snakes was more surprising than Hancock's marriage. Soon they arrived at Amazon Lily, and Luffy and Hancock finally came out of the room, full of dark circles under their eyes and asking for food, a lot of it to replenish their energies. On an island thousands of kilometers away, even in the calm belt, an old man was hitting a girl. It hurts, Grandpa. Lucy shouted as she felt a callus forming on her forehead. Come on, Lucy. This is the fist of love. You're not strong enough yet. How do you plan to face your brother? Haven't you seen the news from the past few weeks? Garp shouted at Lucy. I know, I'll catch him. Lucy said with determination. It's still not enough. Garp shouted, punching Lucy, who used hockey to defend against her grandfather's attack but was thrown back, bouncing like a rubber ball. I can't take it anymore. Lucy commented defeated. She had lost count of how many times she had been hit today. Rest, we'll continue in a few hours. Garp commented and began to walk squarely back to the camp he had set up to train his granddaughter. He had brought her to this island weeks ago to teach her the 6 styles and hockey, to turn her into a powerful marine. She learned the basics of hockey really fast, although there was still a long way to go before saying she was adequate. Garp also brought his other students, and they were passed out somewhere on the island, bleeding on the ground, since his training was very rigorous. On the beach of the island, the iconic ship of the Vice Admiral was stationed with his team, and a specific den-den-mushi rang at that moment, causing a Commodore to enter the room and pick it up before answering it right there. After being shocked by what happened, he quickly left the ship and went to the island using moonwalk. Vice Admiral Garp. He greeted his superior quickly. What is it? Garp asked, seeing the den-den-mushi in his hand. It's better if you see for yourself. The man said, passing the phone to Garp. Hello? Garp asked. Grandpa. The voice on the other side was quite excited. Luffy. You damned brat, are you up to trouble again? Garp shouted immediately, seeing his delinquent grandson again. Did you see my bounty? Tell Sengoku that 1 billion would be very welcome. Luffy laughed and commented on the phone. Luffy, you damned outlaw, you shouldn't be happy being a pirate worth 750 million. Garp yelled again. Ha 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 ha. How are you? Luffy asked, changing the subject. You're asking how your grandfather is? Boo ha ha ha. My little grandson is worried about me. Garp shouted, laughing heartily, leaving the Commodore beside him confused, as he had been speaking in anger just a moment ago. How had one question changed the Vice Admiral's mood? But I'm fine. I'm training your sister to capture you. He changed his voice to be more stern. That's good, I miss you guys. I hope we can meet soon. I want to kick your butt again, Grandpa. Luffy said, laughing. Boo ha 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 ha. Garp laughed with a blush when Luffy said he missed them, but his voice became severe again with a sharp look. You think you're ready to kick this old man's butt? Wait, because soon I'll judge you with justice. Garp said. Anyway. Why did you call and seem so happy? Did something happen? Garp asked, more calmly, while wiping his nose. Yes, Grandpa, you're going to be a great-grandfather. I'm going to be a father. Luffy announced with the same cheerful tone. Wait. What? Garp seemed shocked. I told you, I'm going to be the father of 2 girls. Luffy was very excited. Luffy, you better be joking, even though that's not a good joke. Garp growled. It's true, Grandpa, I'm going to be a father. I'm serious. Luffy insisted. You damn. How dare you have my great-granddaughters when you've become an outlaw? I swear I'm going to teach you a lesson. Garp yelled at Luffy at that moment. Anyway, I have to marry their mother here urgently, so I just called to let you know that the Monkey D. family is going to increase soon. Luffy said and hung up the phone at that moment. That Luffy. Garp seemed furious. Vice Admiral. The Commodore was quite lost listening to all this. He didn't even invite me to the wedding. I should be the godfather of my great-granddaughters. Garp started to cry with rage and swore he would beat Luffy so much with his fists of love the next time they met. Chapter 204, First Wife 02. The floating islands finally stabilized above Amazon Lily. Captain, do I have to be part of this? I heard the women of Amazon Lily kill any man who approaches the island. Will we be okay, Captain? Beto asked, quite worried as he steered the ship down with the snakes. Don't worry, your captain is going to marry the queen of the Amazons. Won't I also be the king of this place? Luffy joked. Alright. Bippo murmured. Just don't get us killed. Captain. Luffy looked strangely at Bippo, still scared, wondering if his companion is aware that he now has the power to destroy any island in this world, but that would be a matter for another time. Then the ship left the sky and finally returned to the sea as it headed towards the kingdom's gate. Luffy. We're arriving. Hancock exclaimed beside him, her demeanor no longer forced, leaving room only for a girl hopelessly in love. That's true, but we have to resolve this quicker than I wish, since I still need to do some things. Luffy smiled at her, making her nod, as Luffy had explained the situation to the pirate empress. As soon as the ship entered, a crowd of women awaited the return of their empress, even though they didn't know why she had suddenly left. Captain, we're going to be killed. Bippo shouted beside him, scared as he cowered. Why do hairy men seem to be so fearful? An Amazon from the deck asked, looking at Bippo acting as he was. Bippo continued trembling. Luffy looked at him and just shook his head, thinking his companion was exaggerating. As soon as the ship arrived at the island's port, Luffy and Hancock stepped out through the bow into the midst of the crowd of Amazons, some of whom pointed at Luffy asking who she was, since Luffy was not wearing clothes and they wondered why he had such hard and small chest in a strange shape. Who was that? Do you know her? Why does she dress so strangely? That hat she wears is so funny. She looks so poorly dressed. The exclamations started while the island's inhabitants didn't know it was Luffy and the Kuja pirates seemed unwilling to speak of him. Luffy looked at Hancock and smiled. Your people are quite funny. Don't pay much attention to them, they never see men, so they don't know how to differentiate one. Hancock commented in a sweet tone as she led Luffy to the castle. Look at that bear. An Amazon from the city pointed at Bippo. What happened to her? Why is she full of white fur? It must be a disease. That's not a woman, it's a bear. Clarified the last one. Come on, Mr. Bear, no one will attack you, I promise. Marigold commented while trying to calm the fearful bear, hoping to be attacked by arrows. As soon as they arrived at the palace, Luffy and Hancock went in to organize their wedding. It didn't take long for an elderly woman to appear in front of the pirate. So you are Monkey D. Luffy. Interesting, since you've had the eyes of the world on you since you came to the sea. She commented, analyzing as she circled him. And you must be Gloriosa, the former empress of this kingdom. Luffy commented calmly. You're not wrong, let's see. Good muscles. Your skin color is stable. Seems healthy, my verdict is the children will be born very well. She announced after inspecting Luffy thoroughly. Really? Hancock shouted beside him, excited. Luffy looked unsure what to say, as this was even too much for him. Anyway, let's get organized. Luffy asked to focus. Yes, you're right. Hancock spoke and turned her attention to the sisters. Gather the entire kingdom tomorrow morning, we will announce the news. For now place Luffy's crewmate in his room and I will speak with my future husband tonight alone. She announced brightly. Her sisters just sighed, knowing what kind of talk they would have, even with Luffy muffling the moans. The night passed and Luffy and Hancock spent another sleepless night. The next day after breakfast, Hancock appeared on the balcony. Hancock-sama. The women screamed excitedly seeing Hancock and looked at her lovingly as a common occurrence. Listen, people of Amazon Lily. Hancock started as her people calmed down. I am here today to announce something important. She had a serious face when she closed her eyes and when she opened them, she was a woman lost in love. I've come to announce that I'm getting married. She shouted excitedly. All the Amazons fell silent at that moment, trying to process everything they had heard. Did I hear right? Said a tall woman. Hancock-sama said she would marry? A chubby one asked beside her. She said marry, like, with a real man? A blonde asked. Hancock-sama, you're going to marry a man? Someone asked loudly, quite shocked. Hancock looked at them and nodded excitedly. Yes, this empress has finally found her happiness. So, I will start my family. She said. Hancock-sama seems so happy. Someone commented. She is so beautiful saying that. I'm in love. Another person commented. If she's happy. We should be too, right? Another Amazon. Even though I've never seen a man. If Hancock-sama is happy with it, then I support her. Another Amazon commented joyfully. Yes, Hancock-sama is going to marry. Another shouted. Soon the crowd began to cheer the announcement, and everyone shouted in support. Hancock looked satisfied at the crowd. Thank you for cheering for this empress's happiness. She shouted. After that, Luffy sighed as the country entered a festive mood. Nobody knew it was Luffy the man who would marry the Empress, since they just thought he was a girl with heart and strange chest while displaying them to everyone. Bippo, calmer after seeing that nobody attacked him, managed to sigh while getting ready for the wedding. Since Luffy forced him to be the best man, it would be either Bippo or a chimpanzee that worked with Shiki at the time. So, a large stage was set up in Amazon Lily. Luffy wore a tuxedo and came out to the country with many women realizing he was the man. "You are a man." The women accused Luffy. "You're going to marry our Empress. You better take good care of her, otherwise." A woman showed a knife, and Luffy just shrugged. He went to the place and Gloriosa would perform the ceremony. "Didn't you dress up?" Luffy raised the question to the woman. "Do I need to?" "Spare me, young man," she said mockingly and continued. "Anyway, your future wife is coming." She pointed behind. Luffy saw Hancock wearing a long white wedding dress, being led by her two sisters to the stage. Luffy waited for her to approach, coming with a shy look looking at Luffy as if he was a dream, like any woman in love. Gloriosa waited for Hancock to approach and stand beside Luffy as she started the ceremony. Gloriosa, with her clear voice, began the ceremony. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two souls. A union that started with a possible alliance and now they are about to have their lives intertwined with one another." She then turned to Luffy. "Monkey D. Luffy, do you take Boa Hancock to be your life partner, to protect her as you navigate the stormy seas and explore unknown horizons together?" Luffy, with an iconic smile, replied without hesitation. "Yes, I do." Turning to Hancock, Gloriosa asked. "Boa Hancock, do you take Monkey D. Luffy to be your life partner, to stand by his side through the adventures that await and face the challenges of the seas together?" Hancock, with tears of happiness in her eyes, replied softly. "Yes, I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. May your journey together be long and full of adventures. You may seal this union with a kiss." Luffy and Hancock moved closer, and the kiss they shared was a testament to the pact they had just formed. The crowd of Amazons exploded in applause and cheers, celebrating the happiness of their Empress and the union before them. The celebration began in the kingdom with a grand party. The women discovered Bippo was a man and asked if all men were like him, ignoring the existence of Luffy. The polar bear even became quite embarrassed with the attention he received. Luffy and Hancock sat at the main table as the official couple while Hancock fed him by her initiative, saying she was training to be a good wife. Luffy couldn't complain much, despite not liking to be pampered or treated like a child. He let it happen on this day. After a while, Luffy took his first wife in this world and flew her to the castle through the sky. He spent the rest of the night without sleep again. "Captain. So I should go without you?" Bippo asked cautiously. "Yes, you just have to follow the Vivre card to Skypiea and lead the islands to that side." Luffy commented on the side. He left the room after taking a shower the next day and went to find his companion, asking him to return to Skypiea without him for the time being. "But what if those men from Shiki attack me?" Bippo was scared. "Listen, Bippo, you can beat them all. You have a power that the world government fears. You can send meteors the size of islands to any place in the world." Luffy tried to put some reasoning into the bear's head. "I can?" Bippo asked, surprised. "Yes, you can. But stop being pessimistic, take this." Luffy had to resort to his last card. He took out an item from the store, a very special item, as it was an afro that he used in Whiskey Peak to fight against Baroque works. "This?" Bippo froze when Luffy placed the afro on his head. "Tell me, Bippo, does the undefeated Bippo fear anything?" Luffy asked, crossing his arms. Bippo, who had a shocked look, quickly turned it into a determined one. "Of course not, Captain," he said. "That's very good. Now go to the sky and lead the islands to Skypiea. You must show who's boss if anyone dares to challenge the undefeated Bippo." Luffy commented, making Bippo's eyes shine. "Yes, Captain," he said and flew out the window to the sky. "What a strange change of personality," Luffy commented, and Gloriosa, seeing this from a distance, could not help but comment. "You really know how to handle your crew, from what I see," she murmured. "It's true, however, now I must deal with my wife," Luffy commented and left the place, returning to Hancock's room, as their honeymoon was just beginning. 5 days passed while Luffy and Hancock did not leave the room. The Snake Sisters always asked if they needed to eat, but the only responses were moans, making them run away in shame. One day Luffy finally left the room with Hancock. "What kind of animals are you?" Gloriosa shouted, seeing their leaner state. "Ha ha 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 ha. Give me food, and lots of it," Luffy laughed and requested. After spending 2 hours returning to his normal state, Luffy had to leave the island. "As we agreed, my wife. You must take care of these children for now. I will return after training with my crew and stay alert for big events happening. The seas will change soon. Luffy commented, holding the woman's face. After all, he had to take care of her for the rest of his life. I know, I understood what you said, but it's still so hard to see you going away. She commented sadly. I know, but we'll meet in the next 2 months, so wait for me a little longer, okay? Luffy spoke softly. Alright. Hancock had to accept in the end. Goodbye everyone, we'll meet again soon. Luffy announced and flew to the sky. As soon as he was above the island, instead of heading to Skypiea, he flew at his maximum speed to the South Blue. After all, there was a person there he had made a promise to many years ago. He had to see if that person still wanted to keep it. Chapter 205, Utah 1. Attention, I am doing Luffy going to Elijah, but there is nothing that proves his actual location, so I will say it is in the South Blue, close to the Red Wall in the center of the world. After becoming a married man, Luffy wasted no time and flew towards the South Blue. There was someone specific he needed to meet before rejoining his crew. He sliced through the sky, maneuvering among the clouds with agility at a speed increased by 70 times. Enemies following the Vivre cards of Doflamingo and Pajon found themselves forced to change course repeatedly, trying to guess where Luffy was heading to confuse their pursuers. Not that he thought anyone too powerful for him to handle would come after him at this time. He still kept them in his pocket, to negotiate their freedom in the future, earning some money from the world government. His journey continued over the vast sea, passing through various islands after crossing the Calm Belt and finally entering the Southern Sea, where the climate was much calmer than the Grand Line. He followed the eternal pose to Elijah and headed in that direction for the next few days without rest as he approached the place, finally seeing it one day as a small point on the horizon. This country is known worldwide as the capital of music, but something terrible happened a few years ago, announced Shanks, the redhead, being the main cause of this disaster when he visited the island. Time passed, and in Elijah, after the island had gone through this disaster, it had risen again. The city of music had started to sing joyfully again after more than a decade in construction. The city was bustling with commerce again. Besides the basics like food, the trade in musical instruments was quite large here. Luffy arrived on the island and landed out of sight of everyone before entering the city. He put on a cloak to cover his face so as not to be identified. It wasn't his style to hide, but he just wanted to stroll around peacefully before finding the person he wanted here, since he would be easily recognized and could cause the entire kingdom to panic with a pirate of 750 million Baileys walking through the streets. Entering the crowd of people on the main street, he walked calmly. Shanks was here a long time ago. It's a link to the kingdom. Luffy had to admit as he looked around, there were giant, shining crystals while a huge stage was under construction. People were singing and playing instruments all over the place, turning this place into a true country of music. Come see, come here. Guitars with strings that capture the essence of the wind, flutes that whisper the stories of the seas. Each note a journey, each melody an adventure. A seller announced as Luffy passed by. Another exclaimed nearby, selling local food. Sweet melodies for your ears and sweet flavors for your soul. Try the melody cake, a recipe passed down for generations, as sweet as the songs of Elijah. With a guitar in hand and a voice echoing through the streets, an artist sang, "Oh, Elijah, land of music and magic, your beauty reborn, stronger with each day." The crowd around stopped to listen, some shiny coins being thrown in his direction in appreciation. A man tried to approach Luffy at that moment, showing off a green crystal. Elijah crystals, straight from our mines. Not just beautiful, but capable of amplifying the beauty of your music. A touch of magic for every musician's home. But Luffy just ignored him and kept walking. As Luffy wandered and looked at everything this country had to offer, he felt a presence approaching him directly. Suddenly, a peculiar melody cut through the air, distinct from the other songs filling the streets. It was an incredibly beautiful voice, so captivating that for a brief moment, Luffy found himself caught up in the music, his feet moving almost against his will. Luffy realized someone was trying to control him with his music, which, besides being beautiful, had a power behind the melody trying to enchant him. He stopped abruptly, his quick reaction surprising the source of the melody. The person behind him did not expect their attempt at enchantment to fail, nor did they expect Luffy to be able to discern the hidden intention in the music. Luffy spun on his heels with astonishing speed, ready to confront the source of this mysterious music. He reached out to grab the person's arm and discover their intentions. But then, the female voice of the person soared, the melody intensifying in an effort to disorient him. It had some effect on Luffy, as the person managed to slip from his grasp and run scared to the other side while running through the streets. "Can she affect me a bit?" Luffy commented, a bit surprised to see that the person had escaped and was running at that moment. Luffy looked at the person from under his cloak, who also had their own cloak hiding their face, while they continued to run looking scared. He began to question who it could be, and only one person came to his mind at that moment. Could it be? He murmured, looking at the person, and decided to take action. Wait! He shouted as the person ran through the crowd with many looking at them in surprise. He ran after the person and would quickly catch up, but she released her melody, making him fall behind or causing people to get in his way. He could deal with that, but he didn't want to scare her if it was who he thought it might be. So, he decided on another approach. The fleeing person looked back while running and singing. She saw that the cloaked stranger was no longer following her, which relieved her greatly, but she continued to run and sing so that the people around her would help her without realizing it. She darted through the streets and entered an alley in the city, emerging into a garden and entering a forest. After running another 2 kilometers, she finally found a kind of cave with a lake, laughed, and crystals, where she used this place to calm down. What was that? The person murmured with a bit of fear. He wasn't enchanted and almost caught me. I'll have to deal with him in another way. I can't let a pirate wander freely on this island. She continued talking to herself. She lifted her cloak, and her 2-colored hair fell out. This girl was a resident of this country since there had been a disaster, a possessor of the Yuta no Mi. She has abilities that not only enhance her singing and convey her feelings through her voice but can confuse senses, create illusions, and even create an illusory world. She ended up falling in love with this country after being abandoned by her father. And always defended this place, as always, trying to get rid of pirates that enter the kingdom. She can sense their auras, although not seeing the real extent of them. She can see how a person may have done bad things, and Luffy was no different. He did what he wanted, and he ended up threatening, stealing, and killing as he progressed on his journey, as he always said he was not a good person. When Luffy entered the city, Yuta, who was strolling hidden, saw his aura and wanted to rid of that person she noticed was a pirate hidden in a cloak. Approaching him, she began to sing, to lead him into a corner and get rid of him, but it seems this one was quite different from the previous ones. He not only resisted her singing with some difficulty but also pursued her, making the girl have to flee and use her powers to aid her escape. She had no idea that there was someone above her at that moment, watching her closely. Meanwhile, the same girl sat down after breathing a sigh of relief in front of a small lake, hoping she wouldn't encounter that person again, and started to sing a small melody to ease her racing heart. She sang something that reminded her of a brief time she lived in the East Blue, where she had met 2 brothers, one of whom had made a promise with a childhood passion. Her melody turned sad, and all the plants seemed to shrink around her with it. She liked to think of that time as something happy, but it soon became something sad, as she had lost everything shortly after and would never return to that place or see those people again, her father, and Luffy. Why do I still sing this song when it brings me so many thoughts of everything I've lost? I miss it so much. She murmured, stopping her singing as she wiped her tears and looked at her reflection in the water. I still remember this song when you liked to sing it for me and my sister. I miss that time a lot too. Yuta. A voice emerged behind the girl, and she turned around alarmed, seeing that it was the person who was wearing the same cloak that chased her, but his face was no longer covered. No. You? Surprise and disbelief took over her expression. Before her stood Luffy, no longer the boy from her memories, but the man she had seen in the newspapers in recent months. It's been a long time since I've seen you, Yuta. Luffy commented, looking at the woman he hadn't seen in more than 10 years, a girl he had always loved since he was a child, and became furious when Shanks told him she had died, where the whole incident with the 4 emperors losing his arm happened. Is it really you? She murmured with a broken heart, letting more tears stream down her eyes. Yes, Shanks told me you died more than 10 years ago, but I'm glad that never happened. Luffy opened a small melancholic smile seeing his old friend. Chapter 206, Yuta 2. Luffy. Yuta seemed to move on her own and didn't know when she had started running towards Luffy at that moment. Luffy let the emotional girl hug him as she jumped on him with quite a bit of force, hugging him back while his arms went around her back. Luffy. She cried out while squeezing his neck. Yuta. Luffy calmly commented. I'm so happy to see you after all these years. Are you really real? Yuta continued to exclaim, and Luffy thought about how she had been in a complicated situation over the last few years, and he didn't need to be an expert in observation hockey to see the darkness that surrounded her from blaming herself all this time. Me too, Yuta. I'm really happy to see you again, after all this time. Luffy cracked a small smile. They stayed embraced for a while, feeling each other's body heat. It was only after 10 minutes that Luffy picked her up by the waist and moved her back a bit while they looked into each other's eyes the whole time. Let's sit down, you have a beautiful place here, why not enjoy it a bit? Luffy invited, and Yuta followed him to sit in front of the place. I still can't believe it's you. But you are real, that's what matters. She said, sitting down next to him and leaning her shoulder against the old friend as if he would escape at any moment. Yes, I found this island after a few days of traveling. Luffy wasn't bothered at all by Yuta invading his space. But how did you find me? How did you know you would find me here? No one has ever shown up, she said with a sad tone. Look, Yuta. I couldn't have come here before, and Shanks never talked about it. I only found out a few months ago, so I came here as soon as I could. I didn't want to leave you here alone anymore. He commented in a tone he usually didn't use. Luffy really cared for Yuta and didn't want her to stay here. You don't want to leave me here alone? She asked. Yes, I want to take you with me. Luffy got straight to the point. What? No, you can't just come here and say something like that. Yuta looked at him surprised. Yuta, let's talk about this later, okay? I just want to see how an old friend is doing. Luffy wanted to first talk with her before discussing his plans. Yuta sighed and nodded. Alright, tell me how your life has been. How is Lucy? I saw in the newspaper that she was a Marine. Yuta asked curiously. Luffy began to tell her about his life, how Shanks had given him the hat, and his subsequent years with Curly. What? You were raised by mountain bandits? Yuta laughed at that. Yes, you should have seen. We suffered when Lucy ate all the food, and we tried to make her spit it all out again. Luffy smiled. So, you ended up having other brothers? She commented, placing her hands on her chin while looking at the lake. Yes, Ace and Sabo, they're still around. I met Ace recently and beat him up. I will meet Sabo soon. Luffy commented. You're always so violent. She commented, displeased. Didn't you see my bounty? I'm a pirate worth 750 million. Luffy laughed proudly. You really became a pirate. It's no wonder I saw your aura when I found you in town. Yuta still sounded dissatisfied. That's how I am, Yuta. You knew that before even wanting to make a promise with me, remember? I shouted that I would dominate all the seas of this world. Luffy mentioned with a smile. Mentioning that made Yuta quite embarrassed as a blush appeared on her face. You remember the promise? She murmured but then lowered her head. I doubt we can fulfill it. You already have a woman, that Yamato from the newspaper. Her voice broke at the end, like a broken heart. Luffy remained silent. Until he sighed and took the girl's hand. How about we have a date today? This island seems quite interesting. No past, no commitments, just you and me. He asked. A date? She seemed surprised by that. Yes, however, I will have to wear a mask. I don't want to be recognized as an evil pirate here. It wouldn't be nice. Luffy commented. Phew. Ha 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 ha. You're right, people would start running. Yuta began to laugh, imagining the scene. So, that's a yes. Luffy commented, leaving the girl flustered. You've become much bolder than I remember. You were much more shy and innocent. Where did that boy I met go, huh? She finally said and continued. Alright, a date tonight. Even in conflict, she ended up accepting to go out with her old childhood crush. Luffy smiled at Yuta's response. He helped her up, and together, they started walking towards her house as she led the way. Yuta was entrusted to the protection under the king of the music realm, but she lived in a separate house by her own choice, being a house on a small hill. Both Luffy and Yuta put on cloaks again and began to walk through the city, while Yuta took the initiative to grab Luffy's hand and lead him to her house. Arriving at Yuta's house after leaving the city, they entered the place, and Luffy almost laughed at so many feminine things and musical instruments. Luffy looked around with interest. You've made a beautiful home here, Yuta. It has a very personal touch. Thank you, I wanted to make a place to call my own. Yuta said. Hey, Yuta, do you still play that violin? I remember you practicing on the ship's deck. Luffy asked, looking at the small and quite old object in a corner. He still remembered the girl playing a similar one during his time with Shanks. Oh, yes, I still play. Actually, I've been composing some music. Maybe I can play for you later. Yuta replied, a shy smile forming on her lips. Hey, is this me and Lucy? Luffy pointed to a paper on the wall where there were stick figures of children. I don't know what you're talking about. Yuta quickly ran and removed the paper from the wall before Luffy could see more. Ha 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 ha. No need to be so embarrassed. Luffy smiled at her. I'll get ready, wait for me, you can take a shower after me. She mentioned, grabbing a towel and heading for the shower. She came out a while later and went to her room wrapped in a towel with a blush on her face. Luffy entered the bathroom the next moment, taking a shower and buying some clothes from the store to wear. While Yuta was still in her room, Luffy stayed in the living room, waiting for the girl to get ready. She came out soon after and was surprised by Luffy as soon as she saw him. Luffy, despite his usually carefree nature, had his own style and surprised the girl by choosing an elegant outfit for the date with Yuta. He wore a white t-shirt with a black jacket and dark pants with boots of the same color. Still wearing the hat, he put on a Japanese mask of a red demon, hiding his face. You chose a nice outfit, But that mask is scary. Yuta commented while crossing her arms around her breasts. Don't mind that, it's style. Besides, you look very beautiful. Luffy smiled at the girl. Yuta, for her part, chose a dress that hugged her curves. It had a baby blue fabric that made her look quite beautiful in it. Her hair, notable for its two distinct colors, was loose, falling over her shoulders in soft waves. Yuta's mask was of a peacock with feathers, quite elegant for the girl. So you're quite famous here? Luffy asked, approaching her. Why do you think I hid in the crowd today? She said, waiting for him to come closer. I doubt you can hide just with a mask, but shall we go? Luffy commented, waiting for her to take his hand. As soon as Yuta took his hand, he led her out of the house, heading towards the city for a night just between the two of them, forgetting their past and problems. They walked together through the island, drawing attention from people walking through the city night, recognizing the couple in masks with elegant clothes. That hair color? It's Yuta-san. Someone shouted in surprise. Yuta was much more famous than Luffy had imagined, as she was an idol here. Who's that? He's such a tall man. Someone exclaimed since Luffy was 2.10 meters tall and Yuta only 170. Yuta-san is dating. A young man cried. It seems so. I would never have imagined this. Yuta-san has always been so reserved, but I still wonder who is the handsome guy behind the mask. A young woman murmured. You're quite famous, aren't you? Luffy commented. I sing every weekend, the island gets a lot of tourists on that day, so I'm quite well known. She commented. I see, you deserve your success then. Luffy smiled behind the mask. My dream is to make my music reach everyone in this world. I'm sure I will achieve it and I will create an ideal world where everyone will be happy. She exclaimed and Luffy didn't say anything to that. Imagining the future she would encounter, today she is a bit different from herself 2 years in the future, but that would soon change if Luffy didn't take her away from this place. They finally arrived at an elegant place as requested by Yuta, who liked this place. Luffy ordered 2 tables at the highest spot facing the sea and they sat down to talk. What can I bring for you? The waiter asked and Luffy ordered some wine. Luffy and Yuta continued to talk like old friends about all the subjects they hadn't yet discussed. Luffy talked about his journey and the people, but that he won in the East Blue. Yuta talked about her life on the island and how she made friends with some of them. Everyone loved the girl. Yuta got a bit loose with the wine while Luffy managed to resist better. Tell me, Luffy. Do you still love me? She suddenly asked, which made Luffy raise an eyebrow. You're drunk, I won't have this kind of conversation with you. Luffy shrugged. But our promise was to stay together. You're married, you broke our promise. She murmured in the last part. Do you love me, Yuta? Luffy asked. Of course I do. I've always loved you. I wished we could stay together, maybe even in that small village in the East Blue, but so much happened. Still, I had hoped you would come here to take me after Shanks left me. But when you finally come, you have someone else. She said, quite sad with the effect of the drink. The few people that were there looked surprised at Yuta's words. Sorry about that. She realized her words and apologized. I'm exaggerating, can you take me home? She said, and Luffy sighed. It seems this night wasn't as pleasant as he imagined, but he respected Yuta. Luffy paid the bill and they left the restaurant. Can you carry me on your back? Yuta suddenly asked. On my back? How about we fly a bit? Luffy asked. Fly? Can you do that? She asked, surprised, and before she could react, Luffy grabbed her like a princess and flew into the sky. This is amazing. She murmured fearlessly as she looked at the island below them and the moon in the sky. Luffy made this kind of trip until her house, landing softly at the door. I've never flown before. She said excitedly. At least she had a moment of fun and without drama during that night. I'm glad you liked it. Luffy gave a small smile. Let's go inside, you'll sleep here tonight. She said and opened the door. I'll sleep on the couch then. Luffy commented as he arranged the space in the living room while the girl entered the bedroom without saying anything. Luffy, you don't need to sleep on the couch. Luffy heard Yuta open the door and saw her naked looking at him while covering her breasts. I want you, Luffy. I want at least one night with the man I love. She said timidly, but with some courage. Luffy would talk to her tomorrow about these things. He wanted her as his woman too in this life, and would speak when she was more sober, but seeing her naked looking with desire, even with a bit of alcohol for courage, how could Luffy refuse this woman? Chapter 207, Yuta 3. R18. Luffy stood up calmly and approached the naked Yuta. You really want this? I don't want to take advantage of you while you're drunk. We can talk about it tomorrow. He said as he stood a few centimeters from the girl still covering her breasts. I want you, Luffy. Maybe we can't be together, but I want you for tonight and I want you to be the person I sleep with. So at least give me that. She said with a big blush on her face. Fine, but don't think it'll be just one night or that I'll leave you after making you mine. Luffy commented openly. He had never intended to let this woman walk out of his life. Yuta looked at him shyly, but didn't speak, thinking that Luffy was only saying it to please her, but she didn't think it was bad either. Even if it was a lie, she fell for the pirate's sweet words. She took the initiative and kissed him passionately, and Luffy put the girl at ease as he took hold of her waist. She had never kissed anyone before in her life, and Luffy sensed this in her awkward kiss, but led her on to make the most of his oldest friend. Luffy caught her calmly getting up and going into her room while not disconnecting from her mouth and led her to the bed. She let go of him, looking at him with a saliva of desire on her lips. "Take off your shirt," she ordered, and Luffy removed his night clothes as he went on top of the girl. Seeing her staring at him with difficulty breathing while there was a glint of desire in those purple eyes had made Luffy quite aroused. He attacked her the next moment as he pressed his chest against her breasts and crushed her with another kiss. "Ah!" she moaned as Luffy took his mouth away to kiss her neck, making the girl shiver with excitement, his lips moving past her neck as he began to explore her body. Serious goosebumps broke out as Luffy massaged him. "Ah," Yuta moaned. "Luffy, what are you doing?" "Ah." He went on to feel her whole body until he reached her crotch with his hand, calmly passing over her pussy. She tried to close it, feeling the touch, but Luffy could feel how wet and hot she was. He kissed her again and made her spread her legs again, while he calmly ran his hand over her private parts. Yuta felt this and clenched Luffy's back with her nails, but she couldn't even scratch the man's skin. "I want you, Luffy. Make me your wife tonight," Yuta murmured, drowning in the desire her body was feeling right now. She wanted him more than ever. "Let me play with your body first." Luffy smiled and left her face to go to her crotch. "Luffy!" Yuta exclaimed, feeling her insides being kissed by Luffy's lips, making her cry out with excitement, having never felt anything like it. "What are you doing?" She continued talking helplessly while Luffy said nothing but continued his work down there, making her think she was about to pee. "Luffy, stop. I feel something coming," she exclaimed in fright, not wanting to do something like that to Luffy, but the pirate seemed even faster with his pussy and Yuta could do nothing but let his bodily fluids leave her body. However, instead of pissing, as she thought, her pussy came, making her feel something like never before and her legs almost convulse with it. "Looks like you've had a lot of fun," Luffy commented with a satisfied smile. "What was that?" she exclaimed without knowing what was happening to her body. "This is normal. Do you want to continue?" Luffy asked. He saw how she didn't know anything about sex, so he didn't even force her to give him a blowjob and asked her if she wanted to continue. "Yes, I want you inside me. I told you to make me your wife tonight," she said, hoping that Luffy would continue, even though she felt quite weak. He looked at her with a loving tone, spreading his legs and taking out his penis. Luffy spat on it, since she wouldn't lubricate it, and moved closer to put it inside Yuta. He ran his head over the skin, rubbing against her hymen, put a hand on her belly to increase the girl's recovery and began to thrust inside her. "Luffy!" she exclaimed with a moan, feeling Luffy's skin boiling inside her, making her body feel even more pleasure, with her even looking at him in surprise. "That hurts, but it feels so good," she said, looking up at him, and he approached her in a frontal position and kissed her. "I'm going to start, tell me if it hurts," he commented and began to move his hips. "Ah!" she cried out in pleasure again as Luffy moved calmly. When he noticed that she was getting used to and recovering quickly with her powers, she began to speed up, slamming hard against his hip. "Ah!" she kept moaning as Luffy kept speeding up, and Luffy looked at her to see if everything was all right, while she returned his gaze with desire and pulled him into a kiss. They stayed like that for 5 minutes without stopping, while Luffy pounded into her and his groin made a wet sound as he slapped her ass. Yuta finally felt the same movement of her body. She was going to release her fluids once again. With the second spurt, she felt like she was about to pass out. "Give me a break, Luffy. You men should release your seed too. I want to make you feel good too," she commented with tender words, and Luffy gave her a small smile as he kissed her. 10 minutes into their kiss, Yuta took the initiative as she turned Luffy over and carefully mounted on top of him. She looked up at him as she placed her hands against his chest and began to move her hips, feeling Luffy's penis inside her. "This is so good. I really love you," she murmured, feeling her ass slap against Luffy's as the man's cock heated up inside her, making her melt with emotion as her body moved of its own accord. Luffy didn't say anything and let her mount him and ride him. He watched her as he squeezed her large breasts and felt her 2 colors of hair hit his face. Yuta looked wilder as Luffy squeezed her breasts hard, making her drown in desire once again as she began to stop rolling over and start humping Luffy. Even outside, one could hear the sound of the girl moaning as a slapping sound was emitted with the friction between Luffy and Yuta each time the girl slammed her ass into Luffy. Luffy was just lying there, satisfied as he felt the girl do everything, feeling his penis against his skin inside her, feeling a lot of pleasure with each thrust of the girl. Under the cloak of distant stars, Yuta began to sing as she moaned, making Luffy look at her a little surprised. She was just happy and let her emotions take over as she felt pleasure and made her sing in the middle of that sex. On the vast ocean, our hearts meet. Sails to the wind, towards the unknown, she sang without losing the rhythm of the song as she moved up and down. But together, we're never lost. And in the sea breeze, I feel it, your whisper, sweet and infinite. In the waves, your laughter echoes, in every port, my love, I see you. Because it's with you that I want to sail, on cold nights, in your arms I rest. And even if the world tries to keep us apart, our love is the beacon to guide us. She continued singing while Luffy just enjoyed both the pleasure of her touch and her song sounded more like a confession of love between them. That night, both he and Yuta were more connected than they had ever been. And under the moon, promises to whisper, on this sea of love, we'll always sail. Through all the nights, until the end of days, I love you, my sweet melody. As soon as she finished the song, Luffy began to come inside her. Yuta felt Luffy's seed spurt inside her, making her come at the feel of it. Ah! She moaned as she stopped humping Luffy's cock and let her bodily fluids join those of the man she loved. I'm so tired, Luffy, but so happy. She commented with a smile as she looked at the pirate. She still kept her hands on his chest, taking one and placing it on his belly. If we had a son, what should we call him? She joked happily, even though it was a deep desire of hers. After all, 99% of women in this world want to be mothers one day. We can think about it when it happens, right now you need to rest. Luffy soothed, pulling her into an embrace as he pulled his cock out of her pussy, semen gushing and dripping from it. I still want to continue, that was so good, Luffy. I want to enjoy it more. She said with difficulty, breathing and drunk on strong emotions at that moment. Yes, come on. I'll do as much as you want, but let's take a break. He said, wanting her to rest a little before continuing. After all, they had many hours before daylight. Yes, she said, putting her head against Luffy's chest, while he hugged her back with the hand underneath and squeezed her ass with one hand, feeling her serious breasts crush against his chest. They stayed like that for a while, just enjoying each other's body heat. After an hour, they had started all over again. Luffy took advantage of Yuta as best he could. He taught her how to do all sorts of pleasures, while the room went into a sequence of moans as Yuta and Luffy came for the next few hours. The sun finally came out, sweeping away the night as they continued to enjoy each other's time as man and woman. Chapter 208, Yuta 4. Luffy woke up the next morning next to Yuta. The girl was naked while he embraced her in his arms after a great session of sex between them. She seemed quite tired, but at the same time, carefree. It seems we are finally together, Luffy thought, as he enjoyed having her in his arms. After all, he still remembered the promise they made as children to live together no matter what happens, so he was a little excited about it. At that moment, Yuta began to wake up, fluttering her eyelashes, as she looked against the morning light into her room and found herself in the arms that enveloped her chest and stomach, making her memories immediately surface about what happened last night with quite a surprise. She was a bit scared, seeing that even though it was great and she really wanted Luffy with the help of alcohol, they had done all those things despite him being a married man. After all, he had not denied that fact. Worried, Yuta looked at Luffy's hands where she felt his hands squeezing her bare breasts. Luffy. She broke the silence between them. What we did yesterday wasn't right, I was drunk. She commented with a certain tone of regret. Although Luffy felt sadness, he was surprised and even a bit disappointed hearing that. Luffy calmly looked at her hair while lying behind her. That's strange, you seem to have liked it a lot, he said, seeing that it relieved the mood, not wanting to appear disappointed now. She did not disagree with his words, leaving her with a great blush on her face without Luffy being able to hear, but at the same time wanting to slap that guy, while she still felt her breasts being crushed by his hands. Luffy, you have a wife. How can you say something like that? She exclaimed, dissatisfied. After all, what would she be? Just his mistress? Yes, you're right, I have a wife, however. It's not who you imagine if you're thinking of Yamato. Luffy commented in a neutral tone, and Yuta was a bit surprised. Yamato and I have a relationship, but I haven't married her yet. I got married a few days ago in Amazon Lily with Boa Hancock, the pirate empress, and we formed an alliance. Luffy commented and continued. As you can see, Yuta, I intend to have many wives. After all, I am a selfish man with a big family. How can you say something like that? Yuta commented. She was familiar with polygamy, but it was still hard to get used to since it was practiced only in some parts of the world and by great nobles, even great ones like Goldie Roger. Monkey D. Garp had monogamous relationships. I'm simply saying that I'm a selfish man, and I want you with me. You've always had a place with me, ever since we were children. Luffy spoke. I never lied when I said I would take you with me. I would like you by my side before we leave the island and sail together. Yuta turned her face surprised, wondering if Luffy was telling the truth. She sighed with a sad heart. Luffy, you really are that kind of man. Luffy remained expressionless and simply replied calmly. What can I say? You're talking to the man who wants to conquer the entire sea. You know I've always been selfish and ambitious. Yes, I have women I love by my side. That's always been something I planned, and you've always had your place with me. Ever since I found out about your whereabouts, I've always hoped you would come with me. This island doesn't do you well, Yuta, and you know it. He said. She turned against him, staring at him with a certain anger, no longer caring about her naked body. Luffy, I can't just go away. This is all so sudden. I can't just go with you. She spoke while Luffy just stared at her with still a neutral face. Luffy didn't know how truly divided Yuta was. After everything she remembered from last night, his words, the feelings she felt while they were making love, the carefree emotion upon waking up in the arms of the man she always loved. Yuta was torn. On one side there was the promise she had made along with her feelings, on the other, she had built her life here and did not want to lose everything again, like what happened when she was a child, while also struggling with the jealousy of Luffy having other women he claimed to love. This made her turn her face away and start to have tears in her eyes. Yuta. Luffy spoke again, seeing her crying. I don't want to leave you, you should be by my side. It's not right, Luffy. She said amidst the tears. You're a pirate wanted all over the world, you know how much I hate that. I don't want that kind of life. I hate violence. You and I can't be together. She exclaimed. She began, seeming like her heart was starting to shatter with the following words. I want you to go away. Even though it felt like there were nails in her heart with each of those words, Yuta said this through her tears. Luffy was silent for a while, then he simply lifted her from his arms and began to rise from the bed. I guess you're right. He said as he was going to grab his clothes to leave. Yuta remained frozen on the bed as soon as Luffy left her, trembling without knowing what she had said. I'm leaving. Luffy said in a tone that was even a bit tired. Yuta remained on the bed while her world seemed to collapse with her there frozen. Goodbye, Yuta. I hope you achieve everything you aim for in life. Luffy commented and left the room. Luffy went to the door, knowing that once he passed through there, everything between him and Yuta was over and they would just be strangers. Walking to the door and pulling the handle, something stopped him. I'm sorry. He felt his back being pressed with the girl hugging him while trembling. Sorry. She said again while her jacket was getting wet with her tears. Sorry. She repeated and Luffy said nothing with his hand on the handle. Sorry. She shouted, waiting for a response from Luffy, who still hadn't said anything. Please. Sorry. Talk to me. I don't want you to leave. She continued exclaiming while trembling and crying, hugging his back. Sorry. I don't want you to go away. I don't want you to leave me. I don't want to lose you too. I lost everything one day and you are someone I don't want to leave me. I thought you leaving would be better for both of us, but I'm mistaken. I can't stand to see you go away. I'll be your wife. I'll accept your other women, I'll accept that you're a pirate. But don't leave me, I love you, I've always loved you. I don't want anyone else in my life but you. Luffy. So don't leave me. She said as her tears continued to pour. Luffy turned to face her for the first time. He let go of the handle and looked at her, while she looked back at him with fear, as if he was going to disappear and never appear again, something that Luffy planned as soon as he was scorned by this woman. He would never accept someone like that again. I spoke the truth, Yuta. He began speaking for the first time. I want you in my life and we have a promise, one that I was willing to fulfill, but you know what kind of life I have, you know what kind of person I am. I have my own ambitions, you know that I will go to war with the world if necessary to achieve my goals, and that will probably happen. Luffy spoke and continued. Everything you hate, I'm going to do. I'm not a lover of peace, I'm not a good Samaritan, I'm not a good person, you are a good person, not me. He sighed and continued. You want to build a happy world, I want to build a world of freedom, and for that to happen, it will only happen on a mountain of blood and many people will die for my ambitions. Do you really want to go through that by my side? Luffy said in a serious tone while looking into Yuta's trembling eyes. Because if that's not the case, I'll walk out that door and we'll never see each other again. If you really want to be with me, you have to be prepared to go through all of this. Are you really willing to endure everything I'm going to do, even being what you hate the most? He asked with the same serious tone. Yuta continued crying, just looking and listening to everything Luffy was saying. She was a bit torn, despite her heart still screaming to follow this man. After a second of hesitation, she finally decided, hugging him tightly. I will stay with you, I will follow you no matter what happens. Don't leave me. I don't want to lose you again. She kept crying. No matter the path you choose. I will be by your side. Luffy stared at her for a moment, making sure her words were true. That she would indeed endure the atrocities he would do in the future. Then, for the first time, Luffy returned the hug, covering her naked body again. In the end, time passed in that house, and the sun continued to rise that morning until it reached midday. Luffy and Yuta were having coffee after talking a bit more. The crying had been replaced by laughter with each other, like a couple in love. In the end, she sat on his lap to have coffee while he hugged her. They seemed to have come out of a honeymoon, very different from the atmosphere that almost broke this bond forever. Haha, you remind me of Lucy. Yuta said, watching Luffy devour the food. I might be a glutton, but I still can't out-eat my sister, you know that. He said with a small smile. At that moment, a knock on the door was heard. Yuta looked a bit surprised, as almost no one comes to bother her in the morning. Now she was already dressed, though only wearing shorts and a t-shirt. She went to the door, opened it, and was surprised, for it was the king of Elijah, Gordon. He was there to see her, after hearing a rumor that Yuta had gone to dinner with a man, which left him quite surprised and even cautious, since Yuta never cared for the boys on the island. Knowing that she was going out with someone surprised him. So, he came to check for himself but was even more shocked to see the man sitting in a chair in Yuta's kitchen. And it was not just any man, but a pirate worth 750 million Baileys. A pirate who had caused big news in the world and now was there, eating at Yuta's table. What is this? Isn't this the pirate Monkey D. Luffy? Gordon commented, and Yuta looked for a moment before speaking. Yes, he is Monkey D. Luffy, and my childhood friend. She said, surprising the king, since he did not know that Yuta had a connection with this pirate from the Monkey D. family. Monkey D. Luffy got up from the table and approached the king of Elijah with a characteristic smile. Hello, I am Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will conquer all seas. And you are the king of this country, aren't you? Yuta wanted to hit Luffy at that moment as she stared at him seriously. Gordon was once again surprised by the man's statement. Well, this is a surprise to see you here. Are you here to visit a friend? He asked Luffy, but Luffy just smiled. No, I am here to pick up my woman. Luffy spoke confidently, leaving the man even more stunned. What does that mean, Yuta? He turned to the girl as she seemed quite shy. It's true. Luffy and I are more than friends. I've always loved him and waited for him for years. Now, because he appeared, I am willing to go with him. She said still shyly, a bit reluctant to say this to the man who raised her. Elijah looked at his adoptive daughter quite surprised and then at Luffy, and turning back to her, he asked seriously, do you really want this? She answered, her heart guiding her, yes, I want to be with him. Will you really take care of her? He looked at Luffy at that moment also asking seriously. Yes, but things are still not settled, since I still have a demon to kill on this island. Luffy commented, thinking of the creature that caused chaos years ago and Luffy had to finish what Shanks couldn't complete more than a decade ago, the origin of all the pain in Yuta. Chapter 209, Yuta 5. After Luffy had declared his intention, the room fell silent. Are you serious? Gordon asked alarmed, breaking the silence, and Yuta was surprised by Luffy. Luffy looked at him and said calmly. I wanted to solve a problem once and for all. Shrugging with both being quite surprised by this, then Luffy reveals. I know the demon is still trapped and I know that in the future it could free itself. Shanks couldn't destroy them many years ago, but I can, with my powers. Luffy said confidently. Gordon was a bit cautious about this. Are you sure about this? Do you know what you're getting into? This could cause the destruction of the island. Yes, I know. That's why I want to destroy it. It will be dangerous for the next years, when the Yuta no Mi falls into the hands of another user. He said, looking at Yuta. Gordon looked at him for a while before turning his eyes to Yuta, who seemed to hesitate against it, as she wasn't foolish enough not to know the truth of what happened many years ago, even if she doesn't know everything. Luffy breaks the silence. I don't want to waste any more time with this. He speaks. I intend to destroy it today. I just need you to evacuate the area of the sanctuary. He said and turned to Yuta. You will come with me to summon, and I will destroy it. Don't worry, we will finish this. Luffy said, approaching. Yuta looked scared. Don't worry. I'll destroy it. Luffy said, taking her hand. Trust me. Despite the reluctance, Gordon ended up accepting, as this seems to be a pirate capable of doing so. Given his fame in the newspaper, while Yuta trusts Luffy's words. Let's go. Luffy picks up Yuta and Gordon was going to make an announcement for everyone to leave a certain area of the island. Luffy and Yuta fly to a certain area below the Elijah crystals. There was a wall with a scripture, one that Yuta found many years ago and was enchanted with the lettering and began to sing, causing the demon's release. Let's wait a bit, as people need to leave the area while Gordon makes the announcement. he said, sitting down in a place and asking Yuta to stay by his side. Luffy, will everything be okay? She asked, still cautious. Yes, I'll take care of this, don't worry too much about it. Luffy comments, as Yuta leans on his shoulder and begins to sing a melody without lyrics. 1 hour later, Luffy sighs. I think it's time for us to start. Gordon must have done his job in clearing the area. Let's begin. Luffy comments, and Yuta nods, approaching the area where there was the stone with the music that only Yuta could read and sing. I trust you, Luffy. She sighs and starts to sing the song. Luffy remains quiet in a corner, just listening and even enjoying the music. As the music was sung, Yuta didn't seem very comfortable, but continued to sing anyway. As soon as it reached a certain part of the song, the entire wall began to glow and started emitting a blinding light while everything began to tremble. Luffy? She asked worriedly. You can stop, the creature is coming out. He comments, looking at the crystal above the door, starting to crack as a shadow begins to emerge from it. Then the crystal explodes, flying pieces everywhere. Luffy quickly grabs Yuta and dodges the debris while placing her in a safe area far away. A shadow falls from the crystal and lands on the ground. Over 100 meters tall with an iconic appearance. The colossal creature quickly roared, I am free. With its dark and powerful voice. The entire island heard it and was frightened. The creature looked around with a smile, saying, now that I am free, I will destroy you for imprisoning me again here more than 12 years ago. It laughed loudly, but didn't notice the small figure approaching its head at an almost imperceptible speed coming from below. This figure looked at its chin, approaching, pulling back its fist as the hockey coating did its job. Then, it delivered a punch with an explosive sound, echoing throughout the area when the demon hadn't even noticed its approach. The demon felt the pain of the impact, making it shoot up into the sky, a few meters, feeling dazed by such a sudden attack. Before the demon could try to balance itself, Luffy appeared in front of it. So you're the one they call Tot Musica? Luffy asks in front of its face using moonwalk. Who are you? Tot Musica murmurs a bit dazed. Luffy doesn't respond and prepares to launch another punch at the demon. His hockey training wasn't limited to Skypiea, but through the training he had on the Combelt Islands, he evolved much more than anyone else in this world in a short period. Before the demon could react, Luffy ran towards it, punching it so hard that once again it was launched backward, but now falling to the ground in a mountainous area with forests outside the city area, exploding the entire area with its body, even making the island tremble. And Luffy didn't stop there, he concentrated as flames began to cover him, transforming into Ifrit with an explosion of light in the middle of the sky. As soon as the purple flames left the air, Luffy in his final form was seen by the entire island. The inhabitants, already scared of Tot Musica, became even more alarmed with another creature appearing. What's happening? That's the demon from 12 years ago. Who is that creature? I remember, it's Monkey D. Luffy. I saw in the newspaper that he can transform into a demon of purple flames. King Gordon told us to stay away. But can we escape from these creatures? Luffy used a part of his more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, to double his size and match against the creature, and then flies to where Tot Musica had fallen. Tot Musica was getting up when he saw another creature falling on top of him, devastating the entire area immediately. You damn! Tot Musica yells, but takes a punch from Luffy flying backward and destroying trees. He gets up and angrily tries to punch Ifrit, but Luffy grabs his arm in a moment, and then moves his other hand and a punch to the chin made the creature spit blood flying backward again. After receiving the punch to the chin, the demon made a pained expression, and before it could speak, another punch from Luffy hit it. He tried to retaliate the punches from Ifrit, but Luffy moved his head, avoiding it, and then received 2 punches to the chest, a right jab and a left jab, making the creature fly backward and devastate a forest until it collided with a mountain near the coast. Luffy thought about how he could kill this creature besides just beating it up. Then, he looked at the crystal in the middle of the island and had an idea. If the crystal could trap the demon, then it could also hurt it. He spread his wings and flew toward the large crystal while Tot Musica was still within the mountain. Ifrit flew and grabbed it with its flaming claws and used its strength to increase the pressure, trying to separate a tip of the crystals from the entire body. The crystal immediately began to crack, with the sound of glass breaking, and the cracks continued until they enveloped the entire crystal. At that part where Luffy grabbed it, with another snap, he released the crystal from the rest. The demon was still on the ground trying to get up, but then saw a ball of flames in the sky coming towards it. It was Luffy with the crystal, and sensing a certain danger, wondered how this was happening, now that it was finally free, how it seemed to be getting beaten by an unknown creature. Luffy then hurled the crystal at it, flying like a meteor towards the ground. However, the demon used all its power trying to stop the crystal as it approached its chest. I won't let this happen. The demon growled, using all its strength to stop the crystal, which, in the end, collided with its flames. Luffy said nothing, just continued pushing the crystal against its chest, trying to force it. Little by little, the demon began to yield to Luffy's strength, which was much stronger. Luffy managed to push the crystal into the chest of the demon, making the ground around tremble and explode as the crystal pierced the creature's chest. With the creature screaming, "Impossible! I cannot die here." But Luffy said nothing and saw that not even the crystal could kill him, so he opted to unleash his flames of chaos. With an opening in his chest, Luffy launched his flames into it, intending to destroy the creature from the inside out. Tot Musical began screaming in pain, asking how this was happening. His skin began to turn gray, disintegrating near the crystal and flames entering him, and it began to spread throughout the rest of his body. He knew for the first time that he was dying. In the end, the last part of his body disintegrated and turned to dust by the flames of chaos, leaving Luffy just sticking the crystal into the ground, making the whole area of the forest tremble and crack, as if Whitebeard himself was there. Luffy landed softly on the ground, still with the crystal in hand. He looked at where he had finished with the creature and sighed. His body began to glow, and his transformation undone, returning to the form of a small human. Falling to the ground and looking satisfied, he thought, that was easy. Luffy had to admit, since he finished Tot Musica without destroying much of the island. Luffy then returned to where he had left Yuta. Upon arriving, he found her with a worried look. "It's over," Luffy comments, making the girl look at him in surprise. "Luffy, are you okay?" She approaches quickly, but Luffy was fine. "Yes, it's all over now, Yuta. There's no more demon putting this island in danger," Luffy comments. Yuta hugged him and started to cry, saying repeatedly, "Thank you." Luffy just smiled at her. Then, he took her home. Gordon, who had been waiting for them, worried, was informed that Luffy had destroyed the demon that had been pressuring them and that they would never need to worry about it again. "So it's all over," he said in the end with relief. Although some parts of the island were destroyed, everything had ended quickly. He then turned back to Yuta. "Are you leaving then?" he asks, and she nods with a hint of sadness. "We're going to stay one more day here. I think Yuta needs to say goodbye to everyone before we leave," Luffy comments, and Gordon nods. She spent the day with Luffy and packing her things to travel with her man, Gordon, went to notify everyone on the island about Yuta's departure. Since Yuta was well known for her talent, many already knew of the situation and knew that Monkey D. Luffy was on the island, since his Ifrit form appeared many times in the newspapers and only one person could cast purple flames in the world. The next day, a crowd of people came to say goodbye to Yuta in front of her isolated house. She began to thank everyone, and everyone was also thanking Luffy after finding out that he had destroyed the demon that caused chaos on the island more than 12 years ago, with them finally getting rid of that fear of all. Luffy nodded to everyone, thanking them, and waited in a corner while Yuta talked to people she had known for many years. After a while, she returned to where Luffy was waiting. He nodded and grabbed her, before opening his wings to the sky. "It's time," Luffy said, "for us to leave." Then all of Elijah saw Luffy and Yuta departing into the sky. Luffy took off, heading to the next step of his plans, excited to have a person he loved by his side now. Chapter 210, Return. Luffy quickly traveled to the Grand Line, carrying Yuta the entire way. Their luggage was significantly reduced thanks to Luffy's power while being kept in his pocket. "This is fun," Yuta couldn't help but exclaim, as they flew at high speed, leaving the South Blue and entering the calm belt. Some time later, the sky began to form small clouds, and a cold wind hit Luffy's face. "Looks like we're in for a storm," Luffy commented, sensing the change in weather, typical of the Grand Line, known for its chaos and unpredictability. Soon, the sky darkened with clouds covering the sun, and a strong wind began to beat against Luffy and Yuta. "Luffy," Yuta immediately said, getting a bit scared by it. Soon a heavy rain began to fall, and the scenery changed from a sunny day to a powerful storm with lightning falling, with the rain and hurricanes forming all over the place, taking over the entire environment. With Luffy still frightened, Luffy continued into the storm, and suddenly his haki alerted him about lightning coming in his direction. Luffy quickly changed his direction and dodged the lightning while Yuta screamed in fear. "Luffy, this is getting dangerous," she shouted, quite scared. He couldn't blame her, since she was never a fighter and hardly ever faced dangers, so Luffy nodded and decided to leave there. Probably it had already turned night by the time they were in the storm. Luffy just smiled and flew upwards this time, going against the clouds in the sky. In this path, more lightning began to fall while Luffy started dodging them and going against the wind. A huge hurricane appeared in front of him and he released his power over the wind, causing a huge explosion in the middle of the storm and lighting up the area. Boom. Other hurricanes appeared in this path and he continued destroying them with his flames, causing colossal explosions. Boom. 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 Yuta was still very scared in that chaos and clung to Luffy to make sure he wouldn't leave her. Luffy still continued the path to the clouds, and it didn't take long for him to reach them. His visibility was limited, and he felt the humidity of the substance with a slightly low temperature. "It's the first time I enter a cloud, but it wasn't the experience I imagined," Yuta exclaimed, and Luffy wanted to laugh. His haki alerted him once more, as an electric current began to form inside the cloud before discharging outside. Luffy saw the line of electricity and began to dodge from right to left and vice versa, dodging that current. He continued in this while dodging the entire time from the electric currents forming, until he reached the edge of the storm before emerging into the sky above it. The environment changed, and Yuta looked at the place with bright eyes, as they saw a scenery of a starry sky with a huge full moon in the sky. Below them, there was still a sea of clouds casting lightning in favor of gravity. "So beautiful," Yuta murmured admiringly at the scenery. Luffy just smiled and continued their journey over the storm. They followed for the next hours of the night in that scenery through the calm belt. Leaving it and entering the Grand Line, Luffy saw an island with a small kingdom and decided to stop there to rest and continue the journey the next day. After putting on disguises and choosing a small inn in a kingdom, they slept together again, repeating their intercourse from the previous night, and the next day they immediately left that kingdom in the same morning. Luffy continued following the Vivre card towards Skypiea. After a few hours, he finally found an archipelago of islands floating in that direction heading to the Sky Kingdom. Knowing it was Bippo, he went straight in that direction, while Yuta was still amazed by it, wondering how islands flew in the sky. How incredible! She was seeing things she had never witnessed before. Meanwhile, at Shiki's former base, Bippo was taking care of the place. He had become quite brave after putting on his wig, and he began beating up everyone who still tried to rebel or seek revenge on the former captain. There were hundreds of bodies lying on the ground, all injured, and everyone looked at Bippo with fear, as he crossed his arms and with a calculating look surveyed everyone, while they all trembled and averted their eyes to avoid being beaten again. Even the gorillas were lying on the ground beaten. He had quickly taken control of the place in the last few days. Luffy approached and couldn't help whistling, seeing the situation and understanding with just one glance. "I see you've taken control of this place, Bippo." Luffy suddenly appeared behind him, with Yuta in his arms. Bippo looked at him excitedly. "Captain, you're finally back. I've taken care of everything as you asked." Bippo spoke with pride, and Luffy nodded with a smile while putting Yuta down. "Well, this is quite moving." Luffy comments with a satisfied smile and continues. "Now we're getting close to Skypiea, so let's get ready to see the rest of the crew." Luffy comments before introducing Yuta, and they settle in while Bippo leaves the islands, heading to the place. Luffy spent the next 2 days with Yuta, reviewing the doctor's research and seeing how he could use it to his advantage. In Skypiea, the crew, as well as the fleet members and the population of Skypiea itself, were training at full steam. In the last month, even though Luffy only appeared once to deliver new fleet members, they still continued training and evolving, feeling stronger and stronger. However, one day, in the middle of training, shadows began to appear in Skypiea. Everyone immediately looked up alarmed at the number of floating islands approaching the place, not understanding how this was happening. "This looks like the power of the float fruit model, flying human devil fruit. Is Shiki invading Skypiea?" Nojiko comments while fighting against her sister in a corner of the island. She had absorbed a lot of knowledge in the last months, so she was aware of all the possible information. "We better check, I don't think he could find us like this." Nami comments. Luffy hadn't told his real reason for taking Bippo with him, so this surprised them, although some with strong observation haki felt Luffy like Yamato and even Usopp. But the inhabitants of Skypiea were frightened by this, wondering where those bunches of floating rocks came from and what would happen to them. To avoid any misunderstanding, Luffy quickly approached them, and shouting with his tone amplified to warn everyone about what was happening. His voice reached everyone, saying that these islands belonged to the Straw Hat crew and that they would be part of Skypiea from that moment on. Luffy looked satisfied and asked for Bippo to bring Yuta while he approached Black Pearl on the ground of the island, where they used to sleep and have a party around the ship. "Luffy, you finally came back. I hope you're here to stay, right?" Nami approached, crossing her arms, somewhat dissatisfied. Luffy just smiled. "Of course, I'm here to stay now." It didn't take long for more and more crew members to join them while he was waiting on the ship. All the official and unofficial members appeared, even the former god of Skypiea and the Shandians members came to greet Luffy. Pleased with the crowd that formed, he began to speak. "Hello, everyone. Now my travels are over. I've settled all the pending matters I had, and we'll spend some more time training before returning to the Blue Sea." Luffy commented. "Luffy!" Chopper cried. "You look stronger, Captain. I see you haven't stopped training." Hugo commented with a calculating look. "Captain, I want to fight with you to see if we are still far apart in strength." Zoro declares from the side, with a challenging glint in his eye. Luffy looked pleased. That's good. Let's do that later. But first, let me introduce some people and what happened while I was away. He begins. To start, these floating islands are thanks to Bippo's power. Luffy said, as Bippo approached and Yuta was placed on top of a rock that the polar bear had set her on. Everyone was surprised by this, since they hadn't imagined Bippo would use this ability. Wait, Luffy. Isn't that Shiki the Golden Lion's ability? He could make things float. Lami comments, all amazed. Exactly. I had to kill Shiki and gave his fruit to Bippo. Now we have a new force in the group. Luffy said satisfied, looking at Bippo. Without his wig at the moment, he seemed quite shy. That's amazing. And to think that our assistant can send meteors from the sky, can't he? Usopp spoke with admiration, while Bippo was embarrassed, almost apologizing for the attention and gazes. You're amazing, Bippo-sama. Shirahoshi said. Luffy waited for the members to finish expressing themselves and continued. Second point, this is another new member of the crew, our official ship singer. Luffy said, pointing to the girl who looked at everyone carefully, mainly analyzing the women Luffy was relating to on this ship. The women, knowing how Yuta looked at Luffy, knew that something was between them. A singer. That's what our ship needed. Vivi said excitedly. That Luffy. It's clear she's more than a singer to him. Nami said dissatisfied, looking surely for his interaction, while Nojiko just smiled without caring too much about it on the side. Well, and third and not least, I got married. Luffy declared with a smile, making all the crew members look shocked at him. What do you mean, Luffy, you got married? Vivi commented, looking stunned, even leaving Luffy a bit curious about her reaction. I ended up meeting someone and made a pact with her. We ended up spending time on an island and... well, she got pregnant. Luffy commented, murmuring, while leaving everyone even more shocked. Luffy, what do you mean by got pregnant? Nami seemed shocked. It's a long story, but as it ended up happening, we got married, since I won't have any illegitimate child. Luffy declares, while all the women wanted to hit him. Even Yuta, who didn't know about this, looked angry, but Luffy shrugged. He would take care of them later. Well, we have alliances and new fleet members, now let's talk about the next plans. We're going to stay together the whole time and I'll be here with you for 1 more month, and we'll go to the Blue Sea as soon as the time is up, because big things are going to happen. And I have 7 warlords of the seas and an important member of 4 emperors as prisoners. So, it won't be long before powerful people come here to find Skypiea, something I don't want. I believe we still have a month before sorting things out. Luffy comments, and everyone feels reassured by this. Now, I need to know how things are. Luffy comments, looking at Yamato. The girl thinks for a bit and starts to speak. As you planned, Luffy, all the fleet members are evolving, even those you brought after giving them a beating. They started training and seemed to integrate into the crew. They began to be obedient. Yamato comments, and Luffy looks towards where Foxy and the others should be, all of them just nodding their heads, since they suffered a lot in the last days. Luffy looks satisfied. His next plan was to train a lot, since he was preparing for war. Good, then let's start training. Luffy declares, as now he would use all the power of his more fruit model, amplify human devil fruit to drastically increase everyone's evolution, making them so powerful that, in the war, the entire world would be astonished by the strength of this crew. Now where is my pirate captain monkey? Luffy comments while far from the ship, there was a huge chimpanzee hiding from Luffy. Chapter 211, A Month of Training. Days began to pass since Luffy started his training, first by putting Chopper to work with Doctor to improve the genetics of already modified animals with a type of new drug. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he wanted to make the animals even more powerful for training after the war. If that happens, he will really be quite useful before Luffy invades the New World. But that didn't stop his crew from enjoying the current modified animals, especially the fleet that was on the island training, the members of the Baroque Works, the Giants, key members of Skypiea, and Foxy's crew with Shikis, were suffering at the hands of those animals while exploring the floating islands. Shiki had done a great job with those animals, despite his macabre plan which was based on destroying the East Blue to take revenge on Roger. Luffy made great use of them after his death and would make a considerable force in the world in this location, even without his main crew. He had at least 10,000 members training, 6,000 soldiers from Skypiea to defend the kingdom, and 4,000 summing all the additions he put in his fleet. The fleet was learning the 6 styles, making a force as powerful as the Navy elite, while the captains in the fleet or main soldiers, learned the 6 styles and were training with hockey. Every member who already had high strength, had increased at least, tens of times with their current strength. 6 styles, fruits, and hockey, this was Luffy's rigorous training. Of course, Luffy had this result because there was no mercy from anyone while he trained them hard, making everyone reach their limit every day. Luffy was also satisfied with the main crew. There were no more weak people among them. Even the animals seemed a force to be reckoned with. It was fun to see the dog, whale, duck fighting each other while unleashing an entire forest area. As Luffy had spent a month and Luffy managed to further increase the power of his fruits, more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit had increased to 80 times its scope, and when Luffy increased his training speed by 8 times, the system doubled that with the crew, achieving a result of 16 times, which in a month, more than a year of training, even those who were not talented with Haki and his fruit, had exponential growth. Many people from the sea during this period reported explosions in the sky below Skypiea and even saw explosions at night, mainly in Jaya, but no one could investigate. After all the results and the strength of the crew currently, the training was finally ending and they were preparing to return to their journey, at least the main crew. Today in particular, Luffy was in a fight. The sky was clear while the sun bathed all the islands with its light. However, at the top, at a higher altitude, a flame flew through the sky. From afar, it looked small, but it was 4 kilometers above Skypiea. This flame was heading towards another dark red energy, which approached the purple flame. At the same time, when they collided, a huge explosion emerged from the sky between the two forces, exploding and affecting everything around, even kilometers away. As the nearby clouds dissipated or moved away, even in Skype, the islands were trembling with the force of the two energies colliding. On one side, Zoro carried his 3 swords, imbued with Odin's dark energy, while Luffy, using Ace, fought against Zoro using the power of Chaos Flames. They had launched this attack at a distance between the two forces. After the collision, the explosion happened, forming a cloud of smoke, but that didn't stop the two from advancing against each other at supersonic speed as a blur in the sky, with the strength of the last month's training. Luffy and Zoro had reached a new level of strength. Then, a moment later, the 3-sword style, Sandro, collides with Luffy's 1-sword style, Itro. The impact in the air between the two cracked, as their swords were coated with Haki. The sound of metal along with the force of the speed they used, created a force, causing another impact explosion, spreading the air in all directions. A moment later, Luffy and Zoro spring into action again, just backing off a bit. Their swords began to collide rapidly, against each other. Soon, that space became an explosion of clashing cuts, hundreds of meters away. Even the seafarers of the Grand Line could hear the explosions of the swords, colliding in the distance. Luffy-chan and Zoro-chan are quite excited. Bentham commented, doing his characteristic ballet spin while shouting and looking up at the sky. Are we safe here? Mr. 3 commented beside him, trying to shield himself from the wind generated by the fight. I just hope they don't destroy the island. Kuina complained beside them, as she clutched her sword, waiting for any attack escaping from them and heading towards the islands. It looks like you're right. Reiju commented, smoking a cigarette, as she saw one of Luffy and Zoro's attacks fall among them, heading towards Skypiea. Kuina sighed and calmly drew her sword from the sheath, Tensa Zangetsu, and a cold energy began to emanate from her weapon. She quickly sliced through the air, launching an attack against the energy coming towards the upper yard. The energies collided in the air, generating another explosion. Boom. Meanwhile, the fight between Zoro and Luffy continues in the sky. It was just a friendly fight. However, Luffy wanted to test using his current sword skills with the most powerful swordsman on his ship. The movement between the two was so fast that both were even smiling, enjoying the fight as they raced through space before colliding with their swords and launching attacks with their energies at each other. Explosions happened all the time, and they kept at it for 12 hours, until nightfall, and the sky glowed with both of their attacks, Luffy's amethyst flame explosions and Zoro's darkness. As they fought, Luffy at one point stopped moving his sword and Zoro quickly did the same. I think that's enough for today. It was fun. Luffy commented with a smile. You're right, Captain. It was a great fight. Zoro said, laughing. Luffy was satisfied with his current power in fencing. He could say he was above Momonga, still below Zoro and Kuina, but he could use his powers to surpass them despite his deficiency. Luffy didn't fight seriously with Zoro, he just wanted to test his skills in this combat. That's why they didn't even transform into their icons. After sheathing Ace and Zoro doing the same, Luffy spoke while looking at the moon. Let's go back. We have a banquet to make. Luffy says, then let's gravity do the work as he lets his body fall to return to Skypiea. Zoro nods and begins to descend as well. Everyone was waiting for them, since no one could have peace while the explosions happened in the air and Kuina and even Yamato had to combat the attacks coming down. Well, I guess we'll celebrate a bit. Luffy announces after landing before Zoro. Then the banquet started again, a quite recurring event in the last month to relieve the days of hard training, where everyone participated and Luffy had a large stock of food, even if that stock was on the old islands of Shiki. Luffy. Try this. Vivi approached, handing him some food. She seemed much more attentive to Luffy in the last month. This wasn't surprising for Luffy, since they end up having sex at one point, with Vivi declaring herself to Luffy wanting to have a family with him as well. Luffy wasn't foolish not to have seen the girl's signs of attraction towards him, but was surprised that she took the initiative to approach him as soon as they had some alone time. Try this too, Luffy. Yuta appeared by his side while leaning on her captain and man. This is really good. Luffy said quietly with a smile. He knew why they were acting like this, since after Luffy had announced that he got married, the girls were quite unsatisfied and demanded that from him as well. Then he had to prepare to marry all of them there before leaving Skypiea, a requirement made by all. So they were training to be good wives, in their own words, which Luffy didn't mind and just enjoyed being surrounded by beautiful women wanting to catch his attention. With Hancock, Luffy had to give her special attention, as she called him every day, saying she missed him and demanding that they see each other. But Luffy said he needed to train a bit longer and they would meet soon, but he always asked how her pregnancy was going and if she needed anything or how the babies were. He had to admit he was quite paranoid about it, but they were his first children and he had never been a father, so he believed it was normal. Listen everyone. Luffy got up from his chair surrounded by his future wives and looked at everyone who was at the banquet. Thousands of people around the ship were around large bonfires in the area. Listening to Luffy's voice, everyone stopped at that moment to look at the pirate captain. We are in our last days here. I will depart with my crew in the next few days. The fleet will continue training on these islands, since Bippo will be able to keep the islands in the air, no matter where he is. Luffy spoke in his amplified tone and continued. This era is about to end and I want to keep our strength hidden from the world for now, not wanting to attract attention. However, at the turn of the era, we will act. We will show our power to the entire world, since this will be the beginning of our era and we will shake the world when we invade the new world. Luffy said with an ambitious smile. Quickly thousands of people shouted, agreeing with the fleet captain. Many might have been there by force, but ended up joining the fleet wholeheartedly after seeing their strength increase, and Luffy's charisma seemed to affect them with the promise of conquering the new world, and all of them wanted to participate in such a thing when they are on the winning side. After that, Yuta used the snails of Skypiea and began to sing for everyone on the island, as she had finally managed to get that technology and started to use it at banquets, winning thousands of fans with her songs. The night continued on that floating island while the world was unaware of the force emerging there hidden from everyone, and the main powers of the world would be shocked by this force as soon as it appeared in the world. Chapter 212, The Grand Wedding. Several more days were spent in Skypiea. Luffy was organizing all his plans and fleet to leave with his main crew from the kingdom. At this moment, he was in the doctor's laboratory, together with the doctor himself, and also with Chopper, looking at the doctor's research and the results of the last month. Chopper, as a specialist in drugs and genetics, ended up accepting Luffy's request to help improve the work that Shiki had been doing for years along with his crew, so he was working hard in this laboratory when he wasn't training with the crew. Luffy picked up the sheets of the reports and looked satisfied at the research. Even though he was not a scientist, he was still a smart man to read graphs and side effects. Everything was almost complete and they would start implementing the drugs in animals soon. Probably, in a few months, they would have the first results. It would be good training with the new modified species, which would help a lot in the post-war before invading the new world. Very well, you've done a good job, Doctor. And you too, Chopper. As expected of my doctor. Luffy smiled, touching his doctor's head. When Chopper heard this, he automatically twisted his body looking like he was using paper art, while dancing and saying, "You think you can buy me with this, you bastard?" But speaking in a cute tone. Luffy just smiled and let them continue working. Luffy then left through the door of Shiki's former main base and jumped into the air while all the soldiers were training around that island. He flew to Skypiea, since he had some more matters to attend to. Heading towards the City of Angels, he landed softly on one of its streets with his large wings, while the people there recognized and greeted him respectfully. Since many considered him a god, despite his denials, he couldn't do much about it. He continued walking until he reached a large house that was built recently, where Ganfall was monitoring the kingdom. Luffy entered calmly through the gate of the residence and the winged horse also greeted him in the courtyard. Ganfall came out of the door already feeling Luffy's presence approaching. "Hello, so you've come to me to sort out the last things, haven't you?" he asked respectfully. Luffy nodded. "Yes, we are leaving soon. Just need to make the final preparations to leave. I want to leave things with you, since you will continue to be responsible for this kingdom," he said. "Alright, let's go inside." So Luffy and Ganfall entered the house. The conversation was mostly about what they planned to do in the coming months. Luffy made it clear to the entire fleet that they should continue training and even giants would take care of most problems, should someone start to make them. And about Enel? Ganfall asked, a bit cautiously. I've left him stranded on an island. I hope he gets stronger, but he won't be a problem for you. I will even keep him away from here, but he is useful to me, and I will continue making my decision. I can take care of him in any case, so I'm not worried. Luffy said. I see. I will trust you, since you can't take care of him. Ganfall said in the end. They discussed the last matters and left some papers with the clans. After saying goodbye to the man, Luffy left the house and went to look for a specific person.